Chapter 2027. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. People from the slaughter world. The sea of swords flashed, and the golden light covered half of the sky. The young warriors of the Pang family were shocked. Mu Zhan, on the other hand, was calm. As the sword-bearing attendant of the young master of the Mu family, Mu Zhan's talent was undeniable. He was one of the best in Rikugenji and had seen many powerful warriors. The sea of swords couldn't scare him. Then, the black-clothed man moved. Mu Zhan's body gradually rose into the air, emitting wisps of black air. The air became thicker and thicker, spreading to the surroundings and dividing the sky. Wherever the black air passed, the temperature became extremely cold. When Wu Kei felt the aura released by Mu Zhan, his body actually felt a little stiff. Immediately after, he swept his palm forward and layers of ripples appeared in the sea of swords. One golden divine sword after another flew out and pierced towards the black airflow. Chi-chi, the sound of metal freezing could be heard. The golden swords seemed to be frozen and fell into the black smoke. They couldn't move forward. The light slowly faded, and the sword will dissolved into nothingness. Freezing intent, Wu Kei thought to himself. He waved his hand again, and several rows of golden sword lights shot out. There were even more of them than before, and they kept changing positions. Vaguely, they seemed to form a sword formation, and an extremely intense sonic boom erupted. Mu Zhan could feel that flawless second wave of attacks was much stronger than the first. The sword intent was even more intense. He still didn't use his sword. Instead, he stared ahead. His slender fingers pinched together, forming an ingenious sword Dao seal. The black smoke began to flow strangely. Like a rope that swept forward, it wrapped around the golden divine sword. The golden swords were immediately restrained, and they couldn't move forward. They were stuck in the middle, and there was a violent vibration. At this time, a light flashed in Wu's eyes. The Emperor's will swept out, and the golden swords seemed to have been injected with powerful energy. The black ropes were broken, and hundreds of swords rushed towards Mu Zhan. Interesting. Seeing this, Mu Bai smiled. Mu Zhan was not originally a member of the Mu clan. He was an injured person he saved by chance. Perhaps his memory was damaged due to the injury, so he could not remember who he was. Thus, he followed him and was given the surname Mu. As they gradually got to know each other better, Mu Bai realized that Mu Zhan's fighting ability was extremely high. There was almost no one in Rikugenji who was on par with him. Lu Qiu commented that in time, Mu Zhan's achievements would definitely not be below Mu Bai's. What did this mean? Mu Zhan was even more talented than Mu Bai. Now, the Nirvana Realm sword cultivator sent by the Kunlun Sea was able to break through Mu Zhan's terrifying freezing intent, which made him feel slightly surprised. This person should be an extremely talented junior of the Kunlun Sea. He might even be the successor of the sect master. Mu Bai nodded. Just look at their lineup. With so many heavenly wheels protecting a Nirvana sword emperor to forge a heavenly wheel in the sword realm, his status must be extraordinary. It's a pity that he met Mu Zhan. I'm afraid that this disciple of the Kunlun Seas will stop here. Mu Zhao said proudly. Mu Zhan would show the other party what a real sword was. Not bad. In midair, Mu Zhan praised. It was rare to be able to break through his freezing intent. You are indeed qualified to make me use my sword. After Mu Zhan finished speaking, the aura he emitted became even colder. The sound of ice forming faintly resounded in the training hall. Black ice crystals fell from the sky. He pointed his finger forward. Black chi condensed at the tip of his finger and exploded with a ray of light. Suddenly, it blasted out and turned into a huge black iron sword. It was incomparably heavy. The golden sword light disintegrated when it came in contact with the huge iron sword. What a strong freezing intent! Wuk revealed a look of surprise. Not only was the freezing intent strong, but the sword intent was also extremely pure. The sword released when the two were combined into one gave him a throbbing feeling that he had not felt for a long time. This feeling had not appeared since the battle with Tian-Do. It was not an exaggeration to say that even before the battle with Tian-Do, he had not met such a rare opponent in the divine wilderness. It was worth it to come to the central continent city. 1. The boundless sea of swords stirred up waves. Beams of swords flew down continuously, intertwining with each other and condensing into one. The light grew brighter and brighter. A dazzling golden sword was born, whistling forward like a bolt of golden lightning, clashing with the black iron sword. Rumble! There was a strong sonic boom below the ancient building. In an instant, the training hall cracked into a net. The turbulent sword intent swept out and covered the people of the central continent city. This is too strong. The training hall supported by the elders will not be able to withstand their sword intent. If this continues, not to mention the training hall, even the central continent city will be damaged. Countless people trembled in fear, causing panic. Wuk and Muzhan were both at the 8th level of the Nirvana realm. Their cultivation was on par with the Pang clan leader. Looking at the power of their will, the Pang clan leader was probably not their match. Set up the barrier. Supreme God Taichu strode forward. He clenched his fist, and the divine power in his body surged. He slapped down and poured it into the ground. Suddenly, the ground of the training hall seemed to be covered in a layer of sacred light. The cracked platform was repaired and the foundation was stabilized. Among the Mu clan's team, a heavenly wheel expert also walked out. He waved his sleeves and lifted the powerful divine light. It turned into an eggshell-shaped light curtain and fell down, covering Wu Kei and Mu Zhan at the same time. The two heavenly wheel experts set up the barrier for this battle. Immediately, the people of the central continent city were relieved. Wuk is going to use some real moves. Qin Hao's eyes were filled with surprise. He looked at the man in black. He didn't expect Rikugenji to have such a talent who followed Mubai. As one of the three main realms of the sword realm of the Great Path, there were princes of noble birth like Lu Qiu. Among the aristocratic families and individual cultivators, there were also extraordinary figures like Mu Zhan. It was indeed the Lu divine realm. In fact, Qin Hao knew that there were many extraordinary people in Rikugenji. But people like Mu Zhan should be following Lu Qiu. That way, his skills wouldn't be wasted. Why would he follow Mubai? Mubai didn't deserve it. Be careful. After the two sides attacked, Mu Zhan's breath was calm. Obviously, he didn't use too much strength in the sword attack. Next, he would treat Wuk as an opponent and treat him seriously. The hairband fell off, and his long black hair spread out automatically. Mu Zhan's eyes slowly changed. His eyes were filled with spots of red light and became more and more ferocious. He looked a little crazy and scary. Mu Zhan placed his palms together and slowly pulled them apart. A divine sword with demonic patterns was born. Just like his aura, it was pure black, like the sword of a demonic god. At this moment, the aura that Mu Zhan released also added a heavy sense of oppression. This person is strange. Ziyine's expression changed, as if he was trapped in a memory. He stared at the field and revealed a thoughtful expression. Senior brother, what do you mean? Qin Hao didn't feel it, but there was a change in Mu Zhan's breath. It seemed to be colder. Moreover, there was an extremely strong killing intent in him. It wasn't killing intent towards Wuk, but an innate killing intent. This just confirmed Qin Hao's previous guess. You don't know much about the untainted land. There are indeed people who practice the sword of slaughter in the land of sword principle. Many people in the three great sword realms practice the sword of slaughter. But Mu Zhan's killing intent is extremely pure, different from others. His killing intent comes from the sky and doesn't seem to have taken shape. It reminds me of a place, Zine said in a serious tone. What place? Qin Hao asked curiously. The world of slaughter, Zine said in a deep voice. Chapter 2028. With the black sword in his hand, Mujan's aura became even colder. At this moment, the spectators outside the training hall felt a chill in their bones. He stared at Wuk, then looked at his empty hand and said, "Are you still not going to use your sword?" Wuk raised his head and looked up. A beam of light suddenly descended from the sea of swords and landed in his palm. "I have a sword." This was his sword. The Vientiane gold had entered Wuk's emperor will and turned into his life spirit. The sword will he released was a sword itself. Other than that, the sword lotus of the Great Path and the Juying sword print between his brows were also his life spirit. Wuk now had 3 life spirits, but unlike Qin Hao who had so many, all 3 life spirits were related to swords. Mujan frowned slightly. Although he didn't think Wuk was underestimating him, it was too childish to take a strand of sword will so casually. Buzz! That black-robed figure moved. Mujan's silhouette burst out with astonishing speed, like a black shadow that was as fast as lightning. He stabbed his sword forward, and a terrifying black light erupted from the devil sword. Even space itself seemed to be frozen. Wuk's body also glowed with an incomparably turbulent emperor's light. He was enveloped by a dazzling golden light. He straightened his body, and the sword will in his palm completely solidified. With a clang, it collided with the black demonic sword. In an instant, countless golden bubbles spread out and the sword in Wuk's hand shattered. "What an extreme sword spirit!" Qin Hao praised. Mujan was indeed a genius. He could shatter Wuk's Vientiane gold life spirit with one strike. Mujan's ability was rarely seen in the world. At this moment, Wuk's figure retreated quickly. A thin layer of black ice crystals covered his right arm. Half of his body seemed to be frozen. He was secretly shocked. Then, another beam of light fell from the sky and turned into a dazzling golden divine sword. Just as Wuk raised his hand to catch it, a black light slashed at his eyes. Then, he felt a tremor in his hand. The second sword was shattered by Mujan. "Sword, come!" Wuk lightly shouted. The dense light and shadows were like meteors that frequently flew down. Ding ding dang dang, they constantly inserted themselves between him and Mujan, blocking the other party's tyrannical attacks in exchange for a breath of time. He realized that the black sword in Mujan's hand was extremely hard and extremely sharp. It contained a ferocious killing power that normal sword intents could not withstand. Even the myriad form gold that was born from the divine wilderness heavenly Tao shattered upon contact with Mujan's sword. It could cut through metal like mud. He was too careless. Wuk suddenly recalled something that Zhan Wu had once said. Even though the heavenly Tao of the outside world was not as all-encompassing as the divine wilderness continent, and its Tao intent was complete, those heavenly Taos that contained a certain attribute could give birth to extreme existences. It was very obvious that Mujan's talent was that extreme. It didn't have the ice attribute, nor was it freezing intent. The reason why the space's temperature was so low, to the point where it could freeze one's bones and blood, was completely due to the killing intent that Mujan released. Even the demonic sword in his hand was incomparably sharp due to the extremely intense killing intent. In terms of sword Tao, I don't think I'm inferior to him. In terms of sword soul, I'm not as good as him. Wuk analyzed quickly. According to the current situation, even if he released the myriad form gold to its limit, it would still be very difficult to break the other party's demonic sword. Mujan's strength was stronger than he had imagined. "If you don't use your sword, this battle will end." Mujan's voice was especially cold. Along the way, all the golden divine swords that blocked his path were shattered. His eyes flashed with a red light, and the black mist that lingered around his body drilled into the demonic sword in his hand. In an instant, the sword intent emitted by the demonic sword became extremely cold. Borrowing sword from the heavens. Wuk pointed his sword upwards, and the Emperor's intent soared into the sky, merging with the power of the heavens. The sea of swords glowed with a dazzling light as they gathered together, condensing into a magnificent 10,000 zhang long divine sword. It flew down from the heavens, whistling as it fell towards Mu Zhan's head. Mu Zhan raised his head to look, and a trace of seriousness appeared on his face. His finger brushed the blade of the sword, and slashed towards the giant sword from the heavens. The pitch-black light slashed open the horizon, and a deafening sound rang out. Even from far below, the training field seemed to have triggered an earthquake. The people of Central State City swayed left and right, and were almost pressed to the ground by the descending power. Truly amazing. Qin Hao was pleasantly surprised. Following Mu Bai was a waste of talent, so Mu Zhan might as well follow him. Brat, are you dreaming? Xin scolded with a smile. He could easily see through Qin Hao's thoughts. Unfortunately, Mu Zhan was from the Mu clan. Open! Wuk let out a low shout, and completely entered into battle mode. A brilliant golden lotus appeared under his feet, and as the petals unfolded, it was like a blossoming divine sword. Borrowing swords from the heavens was the southern region's sword sect's secret art. Just now, he had gathered thousands of sword intents together, and activated it with his secret art. Even so, it couldn't withstand a single sword from Mu Zhan, so one could imagine how strong his opponent was. Finally serious, Mu Zhan saw the sword lotus under Wuk's feet, and silently nodded. This lotus should be his opponent's sword primary soul. At this moment, Mu Zhan's palm let go of the black demonic sword. Layers of light erupted from the demonic sword, and each layer of light separated, turning into a pitch-black sword, and arranged itself in front of him. Mu Zhan pointed his finger forward, and in the void, streams of black swords whistled through the air, and fell towards the figure standing in the middle of the sword lotus. Controlling sword calamity. Wuk shouted. The fluttering sword lotus closed, and the golden petals connected seamlessly, wrapping him inside. It was like a golden cocoon, and the light it emitted was indestructible. 3 vanishing shadows sword calamity, the first calamity, controlling sword. Dong, dong, dong. Terrifying sounds of impact kept exploding on the golden sword cocoon, shaking the dojo crazily. The black swords eroded the golden sword cocoon, like huge black spots remaining there, but in the end they couldn't completely destroy it. Punishment sword calamity. Wuk's shout came from the space, and then the closed sword lotus suddenly bloomed, and streams of sharp sword light flew out, dense and swift, turning into a surging great path sword river, surging and unstoppable, and drowning Mu Zhan. Mu Zhan held the black demonic sword with both hands. His eyes turned completely red as his black hair danced wildly in the wind. Terrifying black aura emanated from his body as he swung his sword at the river of swords. The sword actually cut the river of swords in half, splitting it into 2. The 2 streams blasted out in opposite directions, crashing into the barrier. Mu Zhan stood at the fork of the river of swords. His body was as steady as a rock, unmoving. Boom, boom, boom. The shocking sound shook the barrier set up by the Heavenly Luan elite violently. Under the impact of Wuk's sword will, the barrier set up by the Heavenly Luan elite was deformed, showing signs of breaking. This made the Heavenly Luan elite, who set up the barrier, look extremely embarrassed. What a powerful attack of the sword principle! The Pang clan leader was extremely shocked. An 8th level nirvana could shake the divine path, but he didn't have this ability. These 2 geniuses are rare in the world. Many of the Pang clan's higher-ups trembled. Either Wuk or Mu Zhan could defeat the Pang clan leader. In other words, either of these 2 had terrifying combat strength that could massacre the central continent. Whoosh! Right at this moment, the surging river of swords vanished, and the extremely intense battle scene suddenly stopped, causing everyone to be caught off guard, causing everyone to be speechless and reveal puzzled expressions. Everyone looked over and found that blood was slowly seeping out of the corner of Mu Zhan's mouth, and his aura instantly weakened. What's going on? The Mu clan's elites were extremely shocked. Mu Bai's face sank in an instant, as if a layer of frost had formed, and became extremely cold. Although he didn't know the reason, he could see that Mu Zhan had lost. What sword technique is this? The demonic sword in his hand slowly disappeared, and Mu Zhan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked forward, and his face showed some discomfort. Just now, his soul seemed to have been cut into several pieces by a sword. It was a sword technique that he couldn't resist at all. You want to know? The sacred sword lotus dissipated from under Wuk's feet. He smiled at Mu Zhan and said, I won't tell you, unless you become my sword attendant for 3 years. Chapter 2029. A sword attendant was a servant who held the sword for their master. They were always close to their master and would follow him wherever he was called. Generally speaking, only those seniors with unfathomable cultivation in the academies, institutions, and enormous orthodoxies would accept a sword attendant. To put it nicely, a sword attendant was an apprentice. To put it bluntly, it was equivalent to a servant, but with a slightly higher status. Mu Bai was the young master of the Mu clan in Rikujinji. His cultivation was in the heavenly wheel realm, and he had saved Mu Zhan's life. To repay his kindness, it was fine to be his sword attendant. On the other hand, Wuk and Mu Zhan were in the same realm, and the gap between their strengths wasn't that wide. In fact, their strengths were very close, but he actually asked Mu Zhan to be his sword attendant. If it were anyone else, how could they not be angry? It was simply a humiliation. Not to mention, Mu Zhan was Mu Bai's sword attendant. This was digging a corner. How dare you? Mu Yao stood up. His eyes were wide open as he pointed below and shouted. Qin Hao smiled. Wuk had just activated the Sword Emperor's sword will and released one sword 7 kills to win against Mu Zhan. Since he won, of course, he was qualified to teach him. It wasn't shameful to be Wuk's sword attendant. Of course, it was better to be Qin Hao's sword attendant. He could also teach Mu Zhan. Think about it. I never teach my sword arts to others. You are honored to be the second. Wuk said. The first was Qin Hao. It was obvious that Wuk approved of Mu Zhan. The training hall became very quiet. Mu Zhan's eyes were a little confused. He lowered his head slightly as if he was thinking about whether he should be a sword attendant of a sword cultivator of the same realm. Mu Zhan, come back! Mu Yao shouted. He would never allow his young master's sword attendant to become someone else's subordinate. Mu Zhan stood there without moving. After a while, he turned around and looked at the ancient building. His eyes fell on a figure. Mu Zhan, you have followed me to cultivate the way of the sword for many years. You were groomed by me. Although you are about to forge the heavenly wheel and step into the divine path, I may not be able to teach you too much. However, my father and the uncles in the clan can continue to guide you. There are many extraordinary sword techniques in the Mu clan that you have yet to learn. Mu Bai said gently. What she meant was that Mu Zhan still had a lot of room to rise in the family, and he didn't need to follow an outsider to cultivate. Mu Zhan didn't say anything. He kept staring at Mu Bai, his eyes flickering slightly. From the bottom of his heart, he didn't want to leave her so easily. After all, they had lived together for so many years. However, the sword strike just now was so mysterious that it evoked his strong desire to cultivate. If he didn't grasp this opportunity, Mu Zhan would feel regret in his life. Mu Zhan, come back. We have stayed in Zhongzhou State for a long time. It's time for us to return to Rikujinji. Mu Bai got up and said. He saw a strong desire in Mu Zhan's eyes. Even so, he didn't allow Mu Zhan to leave, not even for 3 years. Cough, cough. Allow me to interrupt. The Mu clan is a big clan in Rikujinji. I believe there are many extraordinary sword techniques. However, the sword strike my brother just now definitely doesn't exist in the Mu clan's sword technique. The Mu clan's experts can't teach you. Qin Hao said with a smile. He looked at Mu Zhan as if he was encouraging him. Mu Bai turned his head and glanced coldly at Qin Hao. How can you be so sure that the Mu clan doesn't have it? Go back and ask your Prince Lucio. Divine Lord Taichu said. Why do you have to ask Lucio? Mu Bai looked extremely displeased. The people of the Kunlun Sea always mentioned Lucio. What were they trying to say? I still say the same thing. This sword technique is an unparalleled legacy. Only 2 people know it. Other than that, there is no other in the world. The opportunity is right in front of you. Just 3 years as a swordsman. 3 years in exchange for a top sword technique. I believe young Master Mu Bai should be able to do so. Qin Hao smiled. However, he thought that 3 years might seem short, but time could change many people and many things. However, even if it was Qin Hao himself, if Wuk encountered something that he desired, he wouldn't stop him. This came from his confidence in his brother. He just didn't know if Mu Bai trusted Mu Zhan enough. Young master, I want to learn. Please give me 3 years. After thinking for a long time, Mu Zhan finally spoke. He seemed to have mustered up his courage. No. Mu Bai said in a low voice, come back with me immediately to Rikugenji. Young Master Mu Bai, as the young master of the Mu clan, you should have a broad mind. Why do you have to make things difficult for your lover? Qin Hao said. It was just 3 years. Are you teaching me how to do things? Mu Bai glanced at Qin Hao. His eyes were exceptionally sharp. I don't dare. I just feel that as the young master of a big clan in Rikugenji, you should have such a broad mind. Perhaps I misjudged you. Qin Hao said. How dare you? On the side, Mu Yao roared. The brilliance of the Tianluan flowed around his body. His aura shook the ancient building. 3rd year. At this time, Zien stood up and shook his head at Qin Hao. Then, he turned to Mu Bai and said, my brother is still immature and doesn't know the rules. Young Master Mu Bai, please don't blame him. Humph. Mu Bai snorted heavily. I have troubled the Pang clan for many days. Now that the martial arts competition is over, I will not stay any longer. Goodbye. After that, Mu Bai bowed slightly to Master Yu and said, Senior, let's go. Young Master Mu Bai, please wait. I have already set up a banquet. Why don't you and the seniors of the Tian Ho Divine World? Before Pang clan leader could finish, Mu Bai interrupted him coldly. No need. 1,000 cups are not enough when you meet a bosom friend. Save it for the people of the Tian Ho Divine World. Mu Zhan, why are you still not coming back? Mu Yao said. Mu Zhan clenched his fist. He seemed to be struggling in his heart. Don't worry about him. If he wants to come, then come. If he doesn't, let's pretend that there is no such person in the Mu clan. Let's go. Mu Bai's body glowed with sword radiance. He turned into a beam of divine light and directly broke through the clouds from the ancient building. Then, sword radiance flew into the sky one after another. It seemed to be done on purpose. Before the experts of the Mu clan left, they completely unleashed their cultivation. Waves of powerful divine Tao pressure made Pang clan leader and the others tremble violently. Master Yu also left silently. He merged with the flying swords in the sky. But before he left, he took a deep look at Xiaohan. He seemed to have an idea, but he had been away for too long. He really did not have the time to waste. You are Wuk, right? Mu Zhan looked at Wuk and asked. Wuk nodded. If you want to go to the sword world to forge the heavenly wheel, we will have a chance to meet again. At that time, I will have another chance to learn from you. Goodbye. Although Mu Zhan hesitated, he finally chose to return to the Mu clan's team. He turned into a black sword radiance and soared into the sky. What a pity, what a pity. Qin Hao looked at the sky reluctantly. He really felt sorry. He values Mu Bai very much. Zien said. What a pity, he doesn't take him seriously. Isn't it a pity? Qin Hao kept shaking his head. Perhaps in Mu Zhan's heart, he treated Mubai as his elder brother and master. He was full of respect. But what about Mubai? He knew that Mujan was intoxicated by Wuk's sword and yearned to learn the other's sword art. Even though he knew this, he still insisted on stopping Mujan's thoughts. Wasn't this the same as killing someone else's dream? You two brats are birds of a feather. What are you hiding in your hearts? Can't I see that you are more sinister than Mubai? Zine scolded Qin Hao with a smile. However, he also agreed with Qin Hao's idea. Sigh, everything was fine. Look at this. Patriarch Pang was full of helplessness. Now that everyone was gone, he had entertained Mubai's group for many days, but he did not get any benefits. What's wrong? Does Patriarch Pang not welcome us? Zine said. No, that's not what I meant. Seniors, please come in quickly for the banquet. Patriarch Pang quickly smiled. They had lost an important guest from the Mu clan, but at least the mighty figures of the Heaven Wall realm were here. The group chatted and laughed as they followed the people of the Pang clan into the Pang residence. During the banquet, they quickly forgot about the Mu clan. They drank until the night before stopping. During this time, Qin Hao and the others stayed in Central Continent for many days. Every day, they were well entertained by Patriarch Pang and treated like an ancestor. It was hard to refuse such hospitality. If Taichu and the others had not taught the Pang clan's juniors some techniques and gave them some pointers, it would have been difficult for them to leave. 5 days later, the Kunlun Sea group continued their journey to the Great Path Sword Realm. Old Pang is too enthusiastic. He insisted on sleeping with me. He wants to worship me as his adoptive father. Divine Lord Taichu said. He sat on the divine cauldron and laughed with everyone. Central Continent is a fragment of the realm war. The Pang clan has lost their divine path, and their bloodline is not very outstanding. It's normal that they want to rely on others to develop. Zine said. Everyone nodded. Qin Hao heard this and felt a slight pain in his heart. Once upon a time, wasn't the divine wilderness like this? But compared to the Pang clan of Central Continent, the divine wilderness was much better. At least it had the protection of the 14 Yuanling gods. It had been isolated from the untainted land for more than 10,000 years. Otherwise, it was in danger. But that Mu Zhan, the killing intent in his sword is so strong. Are all the cultivators of the slaughtering world as powerful as him? Qin Hao looked at Zine. Zine shook his head slightly. There are pros and cons. This is the common sense of the heavenly path. It's the same in any realm. Although I don't know much about the slaughtering world, not everyone is as outstanding as Mu Zhan. Xiao Han, Wuk, and the others felt a ripple in their hearts. Zine's words made sense. Otherwise, the slaughtering world was too terrifying. Senior brother, how do the people of the slaughtering world cultivate? Could it be that they kill everyone they see, and the more they kill, the stronger their cultivation becomes? Qin Hao asked curiously. According to the laws of the heavenly path, the situation of the slaughtering world should be like this. The more they kill people, the stronger their killing intent should be. Those perverts who killed their parents and brothers should have all cultivated to become killing gods. Zine's eyes widened. He looked at Qin Hao as if he was looking at an idiot. Can you be more normal? Although he didn't know much about the slaughtering world, it was definitely not as inhumane as Qin Hao said. Otherwise, the slaughtering world would have perished by itself. There was no need to care at all, as all the living beings would die on their own. But according to what Zine knew, the slaughtering world was actually very prosperous. It was under the rule of a divine king in the Archean realm. The heavenly path operated in an orderly manner. If there's a chance, we'll know when we go take a look. Wuk said. He also wanted to see what the place Mu Zhan stayed in was like. Sigh, what a pity, what a pity. When Qin Hao thought of missing out on a talent, he felt incomparable heartache. There was no other way. The divine wilderness was too poor. If Mu Zhan could forge the heavenly wheel and become the killing god of the divine wilderness, how good would that be? Qin Hao was definitely better at using people than Mu Bai. Don't think about it anymore. Although that person's surname is Mu, I can feel that he isn't from the Mu clan. There should be a lot of stories hidden on him. It's best that you don't get close to him. Why don't you tell me about yourself? Which main world have you decided to go to? Xin faced Qin Hao and Wuk. This trip was all for them. The Great Dao Sword World is divided into 3 main worlds: Rikugenji, True Dragon Sword World, and Seamless Sword World. There's no need to talk about Rikugenji and True Dragon Sword World. You've seen Prince Lucio and Prince Longimo. This Seamless Sword World is very different from the other 2 worlds. What's the difference? Qin Hao asked. The attribute of the heavenly Dao is different. The ruling class is different. Even the direction of the sword Dao is different. Xin said. Senior brother, let's hear it. Qin Hao asked honestly. Chapter 2030. Wulin Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Seamless Domain, Rikugenji and the True Dragon Sword World are ruled by godlords, and they have absolute authority to kill. The Seamless Sword World originated from an academy known as the Seamless Academy. A major power from the academy ascended, and his heavenly wheel gathered the will of the heavenly Daos, expanding his divine spark and becoming a godlord. Thus, the Seamless Sword World was born, Xin said. The 3 sword worlds were fundamentally different. Although they all had godlords, Rikugenji and the True Dragon Sword World had their own clans as their core. All power was concentrated in the hands of the most powerful member of the clan. It was somewhat similar to the imperial power of the mortal realms. The Seamless Sword World was different. It was more like a holy land for spreading the Dao. Unless something special happened, the godlord of the Seamless Sword World wouldn't pay any attention to the affairs of the world. From the looks of it, the Seamless Sword World seems to have more freedom, Qin Hao said. What's the difference in the direction of the Dao of the sword? Wuk asked. Xin didn't immediately answer. Instead, he turned to Wuk and said, During the Kunlun Flourishing Sea incident, the 2 of you discussed the Dao of the sword with Lu Qiu and Long Miao. Tell me, what's the difference between their sword intents? Wuk and Qin Hao exchanged glances. They said in unison, intent and body. That's right. Xin nodded in satisfaction. Lu Qiu's sword intent is more focused on the Dao of the sword. Compared to Long Miao's, his sword intent is stronger. The True Dragon God clan, however, is formed from monsters. Their innate talents cannot be changed. It's not just the Dragon clan. All the cultivators of the True Dragon Sword World are more skilled in body arts. In truth, Rikugenji and the True Dragon Sword World had more humans than monsters. However, there were also many humans with powerful bodies who lived in the True Dragon Sword World. This was because the environment there was more suitable than Rikugenji. Qin Hao let out a sigh of relief. He thought back to the scene at Seven Sword Mountain. Lu Qiu and Lu Qiu had fought for the 7th peak. Lu Qiu's translation. Lu Qiu's art translation. No wonder. It turned out that the direction of the heavenly Dao of the 2 worlds was different. However, this did not mean that Long Miao would definitely lose in a real fight. The dragon race was better at physical skills. If they fought with sword skills instead of sword intent, Lu Qiu might not have the upper hand. Rikugenji is more suitable for you to cast the Sky Wheel, Qin Hao said to Wuk. Wuk's swordsmanship leaned more toward the realm of will rather than the domineering physique. Qin Hao, on the other hand, was more suited to hone his swordsmanship in the True Dragon Sword realm. No need to rush to a conclusion. Let's hear what the Sect Lord has to say about the Seamless Sword realm, Wuk said. The Seamless Sword World was born because of the Seamless Divine Lord. The power of the world is naturally the same as the power of the Divine Lord. This senior is an expert in spatial sword technique. He once combined the power of space and the way of the sword. He called himself the Seamless Sword God. So, you all understand, right? Zine chuckled and glanced at Illusion Sovereign. Not only was Sword God Avicii's Sword Tao extraordinary, but his Grand Tao of Space was also extremely powerful. From the looks of it, we should go to the Seamless World. Illusion Sovereign was overjoyed. The Heavenly Tao, which contained the Grand Tao of Space, was like a fish in water to him. He no longer had to worry about his sky will being suppressed. In fact, he could even borrow the power of the Seamless World to train his own Grand Tao of Space. No. Wuk is not proficient in spatial energy. He should go to Rikujinji. Qin Hao knew Wuk the best. Rikujinji was the ideal place, and Lu Qiu would take care of him. The expert who has trained his swordsmanship to the peak in Rikujinji has to be Divine Lord Lu. If he goes to Rikujinji, does that mean Wuk will have to take him as his master? Xiaohan said. This probably wasn't what Wuk wanted. Actually, the true Dragon Sword world isn't bad either. It trains a strong body and focuses on the Tao of sword battle. Fighting with others will be very exciting, Divine Lord Taichu said. It doesn't matter which sword world you go to. The sword Tao power in the three sword worlds is similar. You can use this power to train. As for the direction of your training, it depends on the individual. Going to the true Dragon Sword world might not necessarily mean that you have to develop your Tao of sword battle. Qi Zhu explained his point of view. For a time, there were many different opinions on the Divine Cauldron. Okay, let's see what Wuk thinks. In fact, Qi Zhu is right. You can go anywhere, but there's one thing. The direction of your training depends on you. You can't make the decision to forge the Heavenly Wheel. The attribute of the Heavenly Wheel is definitely closely related to the Great World. I hope you can think about this before making a decision, Zine said. The sword will released by the Heavenly Wheel forged in Rikujinji would have an innate advantage. The Heavenly Wheel forged in the true Dragon Sword world would definitely strengthen the Divine Body and strengthen all aspects of the Divine Body. If the Heavenly Wheel was forged in the Seamless Sword world, the sword will would contain the Tao of Space. For cultivators who weren't good at space, it would undoubtedly be an additional gift. It could be said that the three sword worlds each had its own benefits. You decide. Qin Hao patted Wuk's shoulder. The three Heavenly Wheels were good at different directions. In essence, they could all strengthen the power of the sword Tao. This wouldn't change. Moreover, Wuk was born in the divine wasteland realm and had the blessing of the primordial Heavenly Tao. No matter where he forged the Heavenly Wheel in the three sword worlds, the grade would be infinitely close to perfection. Qin Hao couldn't guarantee that it would be perfect, but the moment he forged the Heavenly Wheel, he would try his best to make Wuk's Heavenly Wheel perfect. Phew! Wuk exhaled. I've decided. I'll go to the Seamless Divine World. Are you sure? Qin Hao was stunned. Yes. Wuk nodded. I'm sure. Why not Rikujinji? Qin Hao asked. He thought that was the best place for Wuk to forge the Heavenly Wheel. Because I don't want to owe God Lu. Also, the Mu family is in Rikujinji, Wuk said with a smile. You don't like Mu Bai, right? I don't like him either, Crazy Tang interrupted. Everyone suddenly showed an expression of sudden realization. Actually, it's not all because of the Mu family. The concept of the Seamless Sword World's Holy Land makes me more comfortable. It's not bad to cultivate in seclusion at the Seamless Academy, Wuk said. Zine nodded in agreement. It's rare for you to have such thoughts. Rikujinji was indeed the most suitable place for Wuk. If Lu Qiu took care of him, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to become God Lu's disciple. Even if God Lu didn't accept a disciple, he would definitely guide him. But in that case, Wuk would be tied to God Lu for the rest of his life. In contrast, the Seamless Academy didn't have any concerns at all because the Academy itself was a place to preach the Tao. Alright, since you've decided, Let's go to the Seamless Realm and take a look at the famous Seamless Academy. Qin Hao smiled. His brother really had a backbone. Even with Lu Qiu's relationship, he decisively avoided the back door and chose to be self-reliant. This suited Wu's temperament very well. Buzz. The exalted cauldron flew, streaking across the endless wilderness with a brilliant divine light. It shuttled through the resplendent galaxy and headed towards the seamless realm of the three great sword world. The Seamless Realm was named after the Seamless Academy. It was a great world of its own. As one of the three main worlds of the Great Tao Sword World, the Seamless Sword World was naturally an extremely eye-catching place in the wilderness. Looking from the endless sky, the hundreds of planes in the area emitted extremely strong spiritual energy. The spiritual energy light was the basis to judge the strength of a world and its living beings. Although the Seamless Realm wasn't as dazzling as a top-tier world, it was much stronger than the other worlds. Qin Hao and the others rode the exalted cauldron into the Great Tao Sword World. As soon as they entered, they were enveloped by the extremely pure sword will of the world. Anyone who dabbled in the Tao of the sword could feel the vast power. As expected of the Great Tao Sword World of the wilderness, those who cultivate here are all naturally good seedlings of the Tao of the sword, Qin Hao praised. Look, it's so amazing. Xiao Han pointed to the front. There, 3 rays of light crisscrossed. It was as if 3 huge divine swords had collided. They stood tall in the wilderness, forming an extremely spectacular scene. These 3 rays of divine light are the power of the 3 great sword worlds. Each is a sword, but they are closely connected. Thus, the entire Great Tao Sword World emits extreme light in the wilderness. Xine's heart stirred. It was also his first time walking out of the Heaven's Wall world. The appearance of the 3 great sword worlds was indeed as described in his father's notebook. What if one of the rays of sword light disappears? Xiao Han asked at this moment. Hearing this, everyone sitting on the cauldron couldn't help but shudder. They all looked at Xiao Han. He really dared to imagine. Each of the 3 crisscrossing rays of divine light was the lifeline of a divine master. The 3 divine masters looked after each other. Who would dare to break one of them? If that day really comes, the Great Tao Sword World will no longer be the Great Tao Sword World, Yi Futian said. From then on, there would be no place in the wilderness where the will of the sword way was so strong. If one of the rays of light disappeared, the other 2 would definitely be deeply affected, causing the power of the Tao of the sword to weaken. Ahem, senior brother, which ray of light is the seamless world? Qin Hao asked. Xine rolled his eyes at him. Feel it yourself. He had a perfect celestial wheel that could accommodate everything in the universe. How could he not feel which ray of sword light contained the great Tao of space? Qin Hao smiled awkwardly. Then, he closed his eyes. His divine will swept forward, traversing a vast distance. Soon, he opened his eyes again. In an instant, everyone felt the divine cauldron under them tremble. Its speed suddenly increased, and it flew towards one of the huge rays of sword light. Soon, it disappeared into the straight ray of sword light, as though it was swallowed by the light. The seamless divine domain, the main domain of the seamless world. Sect, family, and divine clan stood in great numbers. The famous Seamless Academy of the Great Tao Sword World was also located in this divine domain. It suppressed thousands of big clans and was the supreme holy land that couldn't be fought over. It was the absolute overlord of the sect. Once upon a time, the Seamless Academy had been established by several divine realm experts. Its history wasn't as long as that of the True Dragon Realm or the True Dragon Realm, but because one of the experts who had founded the academy had his celestial wheel mutated, causing it to expand and evolve. In a single night, he had become a divine lord, and the Seamless Academy had undergone a heaven-shaking, earth-toppling transformation. The continent had rapidly expanded, and with the passage of time, Every single speck of dust that drifted out of the divine realm had transformed into an enormous heavenly Tao. At this moment, in the main domain of the seamless divine domain, a huge divine cauldron fell from the sky. Qin Hao and the others directly descended into the divine domain. Qin Hao looked down. Majestic cities were everywhere. On the incomparably huge, immortal peaks stood majestic ancient palaces. It was too much for the eyes to take in. And this place wasn't the core of the divine domain. They were still in the periphery. How spectacular! Xiao Han exclaimed. What he saw was far from what the Kunlun continent could compare to. It was even more incomparable to the Phantom continent. Just by using one's mind to sense this place, he could sense waves of astonishing divine Tao aura. This is the main domain of the seamless divine domain. Most of the celestial wheel cultivators in the entire great world are gathered here. Whether it's in terms of numbers or cultivation, Kunlun can't compare to it. Zine said. Kunlun was only one of the celestial wheels. If they went to the celestial wheel divine domain, he believed that its scale and number of experts wouldn't be inferior to the seamless divine domain. After all, the celestial wheel god's strength was famous throughout the wilderness. He was above the sword god of infinity and had the qualifications to challenge the divine kings. There were also strong and weak divine lords. Without a doubt, the celestial wheel god was one of the top divine lords. Zine personally believed that he was at the limit. Senior brother, where are we going now? Qin Hao looked at the seamless divine domain. He was also shocked and asked. Follow me, Zine said. He took out an item from his sleeve. It was a paper crane. As Zine released his hand, the paper crane spread its wings. Its entire body was suffused with light. It actually began to fly in a direction of the divine domain. Chapter 2031. 800 Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Chapter 2031. Invincible Return in Fulwuk wanted to forge Tianluan in the seamless world, so it was best to have Sword God guide him during his cultivation. They had just arrived at the seamless divine domain, so they couldn't rashly go to the academy. The academy was a supreme sacred ground, and it was difficult for outsiders to enter. Not to mention meeting Sword God Seamless. They were neither relatives nor friends, so they didn't have the honor to do so. How could they meet a divine master of a world just because they wanted to? The paper crane in Zine's hand was left behind by an old friend. That old friend happened to be a sword cultivator from the seamless world. He had suffered some injuries in his early years and had gone to the Kunlun Sea to seek treatment. He had also listened to Exalted One's preaching. He could be considered half of Zine's sect. After Exalted One recovered, he returned to the seamless world. Before he left this paper crane for Zine, saying that if he came here one day, he could follow the paper crane to find him. Zine once thought that there was no chance. Who knew that he would be able to use an old friend's item today? Senior brother's reputation is still great, making friends everywhere. Qin Hao felt at ease. Since there was someone to receive him, he had found a place to stay in the seamless world. Stop flattering me, follow closely. Zine poured his divine power into the paper crane, and it seemed to have turned into a living creature. It flapped its wings and flew with the crane crying. Qin Hao put away the exalted cauldron, and the group followed behind Zine. They flew through countless majestic cities and finally arrived at a bustling area. The streets were bustling with activity, and cultivators flowed in an endless stream. With a casual perception, the weakest figure walking on the streets was at least an imperial master. It seemed that the imperial Tao had become a common existence here, just like the common people. Crane Manor. The paper crane fell from the sky and flew into a large manor. Qin Hao and the others retracted their auras and stopped in front of the manor's gate to wait. The owner of the manor is called Supreme Crane. He is in the celestial wheel realm. We have come from afar, so please be polite. Zine reminded. Everyone nodded. It wasn't long before a wave of movement sounded out from within the estate, and a large number of footsteps were rushing over here. As the estate door opened, a middle-aged man with white hair, a youthful complexion, and a sage-like bearing walked out to greet them, and his body was suffused with an abundant aura of the sword Tao. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. It wasn't until the paper crane flew to my hand that I suddenly woke up. It really is Brother Zine. The crane reverend smiled and cupped his fists. Brother He, long time no see. You're still as carefree and unrestrained as ever. Zine cupped his hands in greeting. Not at all, not at all. Everyone, please come in. Servants, prepare the wine. Senior Crane pulled Zine's arm and walked with him in a very enthusiastic manner. At the rear, Qin Hao and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. At first, they were worried that there would be too many accidents and that their relationship might have become distant. Now, it seemed that they were overthinking. Supreme Crane's image was better than expected. Stepping into the Crane estate, the environment was elegant and unique. There were many pavilions and rare plants everywhere. From this, it could be judged that Supreme Crane's conditions were not bad. Brother Zine, we have not seen each other for more than 10,000 years. I originally thought that it would be difficult for us to meet again. What wind has blown all of you here today from the Kunlun Sea? In the main hall, Supreme Crane spoke and personally poured wine for Zine Clan Lord. To be honest, Brother He, I have a junior who is about to forge the celestial wheel. Because he cultivates the sword Tao, he came to the seamless world, Zine replied. I see. Supreme Crane's expression brightened. His gaze swept around the people in the main hall, and finally fell on Wuk. Well, 8th Order Nirvana and the precepts are about to be perfected. The next step is indeed to forge the celestial wheel. Senior, you have sharp eyes. Wuk spoke. He was slightly surprised. He had deliberately concealed his aura, but Supreme Crane still saw through him at a glance. No wonder Supreme Crane was a sword god of the great Tao sword realm. My level is just higher than yours. Everyone, there is no need to be reserved. Please drink this cup. Supreme Crane raised his cup and toasted. Everyone followed suit. Brother He, my junior's talent in the sword Tao is extremely high. I don't feel at ease leaving him in the hands of ordinary celestial wheel experts. I wonder if Brother He has any connections with the Academy? Can you open a small door? Zine went straight to the point. Supreme Crane was from the seamless world and had cultivated to the sword god level. With his network, he should have some connections with the Academy. This. Supreme Crane's smile froze, and he revealed a troubled expression. He said, I'm not afraid of Brother Zine's joke. Among the many celestial wheel experts in the seamless world, my strength is hardly presentable, especially in the Academy. The Academy stands at the core of the divine region, the sacred ground of the Divine Master's orthodoxy. It's not a place for a nobody like me to set foot in. Hearing this, everyone in the Kunlun Sea was shocked. The 3 lines Supreme Crane was referring to was the celestial wheel of time's veins. Only those who had cultivated the divine path for more than 30,000 years were qualified to set foot in the Academy. Supreme Crane could not reach such a height. Zine frowned slightly and said, Do you know anyone in the Academy? Well. Supreme Crane hesitated. It seemed to be inconvenient. Oh, the day before we left the Kunlun Sea, we just made a cauldron of divine essence pills. It's quite a coincidence that this cauldron of pills is fated to be with Brother He. Zine looked at Supreme God Taichu with a smile. Bring the pills. Yes, Overlord. Supreme God Taichu reached out his palm. With a flash of light, a small jade bottle appeared. Supreme God Taichu handed it to Zine solemnly. However, at this moment, Supreme God Taichu looked at Supreme Crane coldly. Brother He, take a look. There are 10 pills in this bottle. They are all top-grade divine-level pills. We haven't seen each other for 10,000 years. Why don't you try to see if my skills have deteriorated? Zine held the jade bottle in front of Supreme Crane. How can I accept this? Supreme Crane's worried expression disappeared and was replaced with a smile. Although he refused, his hands were rubbing restlessly. Brother He, you don't have to be so polite. You've heard my father talk about Tao. You can be considered as half a disciple of the Kunlun Sea. These are pills made by your own family. Zine directly handed the Divine Essence pills to Supreme Crane and said, "It's about my junior entering the academy." "Thank you, Brother He." Supreme Crane weighed the jade bottle in his hand and sighed deeply. Good pills, good pills. The divine pills made by the Kunlun Sea were once famous. It's a pity that I don't have the fortune to enjoy this bottle of Divine Essence pills. After he finished speaking, he stuffed the bottle back into Zine's hand. Zine's eyes narrowed slightly and said, "What do you mean, Brother He? It's not that I don't want to do it for you. My ability is limited. If Zine comes to talk about old times with me, I'll open the door to welcome him. But if you want me to send someone into the academy, I'm sorry, I can't do it." Supreme Crane was indeed tempted by this bottle of Divine Essence pills. However, there were some things that pills couldn't compare to. "Supreme Crane, you've also come to the Kunlun Sea to ask for medicine. With your current state, I don't believe that no matter how Supreme Crane treated you, the Academy has nothing to do with how Supreme Crane treated you." Taichu shouted. Since Supreme Crane was able to listen to Supreme Crane's talk about Tao, it meant that Supreme Crane was recognized by Supreme Crane and regarded as his disciple. What about Supreme Crane? Now that he was asked to do something, he was making excuses. Was his ability really limited? Probably not. Taichu backed down. Zine's face darkened. "Humph, I'm just stating facts." Supreme God Taichu sat back down. The Chu clan and Chi Zhu didn't look good either. They knew that Zihua was good at judging people. After all, they were competitors of the same generation. However, Supreme Crane seemed to be a hypocrite. He didn't take Kunlun Sea seriously at all. "You really can't do it?" Zine asked. "I can't do it." Supreme Crane casually threw the wine cup aside. "Sorry to bother you." Zine stood up and walked out of the hall. Qin Hao and the others saw this and stood up to leave. When they were about to step out of the door, Zine turned around and said to Supreme Crane, "He soon, when your sword spirit was damaged, it was my father who used divine materials to make pills for you for 49 years. That was how he healed your sword spirit step by step. He also taught you some methods of making pills so that you can recuperate on your own. Even if you don't care about what you did in the past, you should still be able to repay the divine materials we gave you in Kunlun Sea, right? 1,000 flavors spirit, jewels, longevity Ji, divine Ganoderma. These are the herbs, right? I'll return them all. Someone, go to the herb garden and get them the herbs." Supreme Crane suddenly stood up and shouted to the outside of the hall. Soon, many people shuttled in and out of the hall. Every time they passed by Zine, they would throw a bunch of divine herbs. They were colorful and still wet with dew. "Look, I just dug them out. They're still fresh. You can have as much as you want. Keep digging." Exalted Crane yelled with a stern face. He had indeed received a favor from the Kunlun Sea. He remembered every single medicinal ingredient of the Kunlun Sea that he had eaten. After all, Exalted Crane had even given him the pill recipe. However, this didn't mean that Kunlun Sea would grant him any request. He had to agree to anything. Besides, Zihua had been dead for 10,000 years. Kunlun Sea wasn't as good as it used to be. It didn't even have a leader and its alchemy skills had declined. In the untainted universe, it probably couldn't even enter the second-rate plane. Did he soon need such a friend? No, he didn't. Enough. Let's go. Zine was very depressed. He didn't care about the divine herbs under his feet anymore. He knew that the seeds of these herbs were brought out from Kunlun Sea by He soon. He soon didn't just say that he could have as much as he wanted. He soon's sword spirit was stabilized by these herbs. Brother Zine, have a safe trip. Come back when you have time. He soon glanced at the piles of herbs on the ground and said, throw them all out of the mansion. They can take it or not. I don't owe them anything. Yes, Supreme God. The imperial servant of the He Mansion hurriedly picked up the divine herbs and ran after Zine and threw them all at the door of the He Mansion. When Zine turned around, the scene made his blood boil. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Father, Deacon has been waiting for a long time. In the quiet hall there were dishes and wine, but they had lost their flavor. He soon looked slightly tired as he glanced at the young man beside him. This young man had handsome features, and his eyebrows were quite similar to He-Sun's. His body was overflowing with a powerful sword aura, and he was also at the 8th level of Nirvana realm. Son, I'm doing this for you. Let's go and see Deacon Chui. He soon walked to the back hall with his hands behind his back. The young man followed closely behind. In the back hall there was a majestic old man sitting there. Although he was sitting there quietly, he gave off an unshakable divine might. It was as if the sky would shake if he stood up. The divine willpower he exuded was several times stronger than Deacon He's. What's the ruckus about? The old man asked when he saw He-Sun come in. It's just a small matter. I haven't seen anyone for many years, and he wanted to cling to me, but I sent him away. Deacon, will the Supreme God come to this year's law tournament? He-Sun asked cautiously. The old man glanced at He-Sun and said, don't think too much about the law tournament. It's not something that he can participate in. It's a gathering of all the direct disciples of the sect and the geniuses of the Shin clan. If he participates, he'll be nothing but a speck of dust in the law tournament. Just let him be my sword servant. Yes, 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 He-Sun said hurriedly. His heart was in turmoil. From Deacon Chui's words, the Supreme God attached great importance to this year's law tournament. It was probably due to the pressure from Rikujinji and the True Dragon World. After all, Lu Qiu and Long Miao were too strong. Even in the academy, they couldn't find a match for them. Presumably, the Supreme God would use this law tournament to select 1 or 2 new disciples and focus on nurturing them. He didn't want this generation of geniuses from the seamless domain to be interrupted and suppressed by Rikujinji and the True Dragon World. However, just as Deacon Chui said, the law tournament gathered all the direct disciples of the top forces of the seamless domain, as well as the geniuses of the various Shin clans. Even the Deacon of the Heavenly Tao outside the Prime World would send their heirs and successors to participate. Such a large-scale and high-quality battle was indeed not for He-Sun's son to participate, because he wasn't qualified. Unfortunately, although He-Sun knew that the Supreme God would select a genius, the He clan couldn't bring him out. Unfortunately, it was also sad. Chapter 2032. Outside the He Mansion, Zine's group stood on an unfamiliar street without any relative. Although He-Sun didn't chase them away directly, his actions were no different from kicking them out. Time can really change many things. He-Sun wasn't such a person in the past. Zine looked up at the sky and laughed bitterly. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Ancestor Chu lowered his head and sighed. Chizu looked at Ancestor Chu silently. There was a hidden meaning in his words. There's an expert in the back hall of the He Mansion. His divine will aura is far stronger than the Crane Lord. He's definitely not an ordinary person. It's very likely that he's from the college. Ancestor Chu said. How did Senior know? Wuk was surprised. The divine fire cultivated by the Chu family is related to the soul. Ancestor Chu's judgment can't be wrong. Zine knew the talents of the Kunlun family like the back of his hand. If so, He-Sun's style wouldn't be strange. He probably wants to send his relatives to the college, but the quota is limited. That's why the Crane Lord turned hostile when we made the request. Ancestor Chu guessed. Zine's request affected the Crane Lord's interests. No matter what, entering the college is much harder than we thought. Chizu sighed. Then what should we do now? Wuk asked. Let's go to the Heavenly Book Pavilion to comprehend the Heavenly Wheel Divine Will of the Infinite Divine Lord and alleviate the suppression of the heavenly might on us, Zine said. As time passed, the longer he stayed in the divine realm, the more uncomfortable he felt. His body and soul seemed to be imprisoned by an invisible force. He knew that this was the power of the infinite world. He needed to borrow the power of the infinite world to alleviate it. Everyone nodded. At this time, a movement came from behind. Everyone looked over and saw Qin Hao squatting in front of the Crane residence's door, collecting the herbs that the Emperor's servant threw out, one by one, and storing them into his storage ring. Junior 3Y. Taichu frowned. Where was his backbone? There's nothing wrong with the herbs. If I don't take them, the servants will secretly hide them and sell them when they see us leave. Since that's the case, why should we let others benefit? Qin Hao said as he carefully took care of the medicinal herbs. He didn't want to waste too much. Let's go. Zine let out a long breath, feeling a little better. He soon threw out the medicinal ingredients, indicating the other party's attitude. He wanted to completely cut off all ties with the Kunlun Sea and did not owe them anything. There was a faint trace of humiliation. However, what Qin Hao said was right. Medicinal herbs themselves were not guilty. As a qualified alchemist, medicinal herbs were the foundation of their livelihood and should not be wasted. The streets of the seamless divine region were incomparably bustling. Although the Crane estate was located in the outer regions, this region was even more prosperous and bustling than an ordinary capital city of the Tao of Heaven. Whether it was in terms of the cultivations of the passers-by on the streets, or the scale of the shops that stood on either side of the streets, the Kunlun continent simply couldn't compare. Qin Hao and the others walked quietly, asking for directions as they walked. There was a lot of divine Tao aura here. As the core divine region of a large world, the number of heavenly wheel realm experts was beyond imagination. It was fine to sense it roughly, but if one was too focused on a certain place, it would easily cause dissatisfaction to the heavenly wheel realm experts who lived there. They might even counterattack with divine intent. In order to not affect others and avoid attracting trouble for oneself, it was better to ask for directions. The outer regions of the divine region were extremely large. Many bustling roads crisscrossed in all directions like veins. There were many cities standing in between these veins. Those cities looked like cities up close, but from afar they looked like independent residences. One could imagine how huge the seamless divine region was. Further ahead is the territory of an almighty in the seamless divine region. It's called the West Capital. There's a heavenly tome pavilion built by the Academy to enshrine the power of the Divine Master. Divine God Taichu pointed at a particularly majestic city in front of them. He had heard that the heavenly tome pavilions in the outer regions of the divine region were built in cities, and these cities were all guarded by an expert. The place they were heading to now was called the West Capital. The expert guarding the West Capital was famous in the divine region. People called him Sikong. His cultivation was extremely tyrannical, and he had a hobby of protecting his own. Just now, the cultivators of the divine region said that City Lord Sikong's heavenly wheel realm has 4 divine veins. He cultivates the incomparably domineering fire sword Tao. In the entire western region of the divine region, City Lord Sikong is the strongest sword god. No one can compete with him. Taichu spoke with a respectful tone. Just hearing the rumors from others was enough to show how powerful City Lord Sikong was. A 4-meridian heavenly wheel realm expert was definitely a top existence in the Kunlun continent. Even Zine was not his opponent. After entering the West Capital, you all better behave, Zine warned. For Meridian Heavenly Wheel Realm expert who had cultivated for at least 40,000 years. The grade of City Lord Seekong's Heavenly Wheel was probably not low. Otherwise, how could he become the strongest person in the Western Divine region? They definitely could not afford to offend such an expert. Everyone nodded silently. Rumble, just at this moment, an earth-shattering sound came from behind them. In an instant, the street shook violently. Even the stone slabs on the ground were shaking. Even the space was rippling with a powerful sound. Listening to this sound, it was as if a carriage was forcefully crushing the void. "Run, young Master C is back! Everyone, run quickly!" The bustling street became incomparably chaotic in the blink of an eye. Everyone had a panicked expression, as if they had bumped into a ghost. In an instant, they lost their sense of propriety. No matter where the front was, as long as it was an alley, they would run blindly like a group of headless flies. "Young Master C?" Qin Hao muttered. "Who was it? Do you want to die? Quickly find a place to hide." At the side, a bare-chested burly man with a full beard shouted at Qin Hao and the rest who were in a daze. His two large hands were desperately trying to hold the door together. The dignified burly man looked like a frightened little girl. Wuck stared. This burly man was emitting the aura of a Nirvana Level 8 law. Rumble! The violent sound of rolling wheels was getting closer and closer. It was as if the wheels were crushing one's soul. Ferocious dragon roars sounded in the air. Zine did not have time to turn around and look. He shouted, "Quickly, get out of the way!" After saying that, everyone moved quickly and hurriedly hid at the side of the street. They all felt that the big movement behind them was coming for them. However, one person did not move. Qin Hao stood like a boulder in his original spot. He slowly turned around and curiously looked towards the source of the sound. He wondered just what kind of monster could cause so many cultivators of the Divine Realm streets to run for their lives in fear. The next second he saw it. It was a carriage that couldn't be called luxurious, and was even a little unsightly. The rusty iron sheets cracked from the skeleton, like broken blades curling horizontally. As the wheels moved, sharp scraping sounds could be heard. The four wheels were also out of shape. Therefore, the carriage's state of movement was very turbulent. One was high and one was low. It was like a bouncing piece of scrap iron. There was a figure standing on the chariot. He looked like a general who had just returned from the battlefield. His armor was stained with blood and covered with wounds. However, this person's appearance was not at all valiant. His curly reddish-brown hair looked like a chicken's nest, and his shifty-eyed facial features were laughing without restraint. His tattered cloak flapped around his shoulders. He drove the chariot and whipped the laborers in front of him, as if to show off his bravery. Behind him, there was a tattered flag that had been burned through and stuck in the chariot. Overall, the clothes were not bad, but the person was too shabby. This was Qin Hao's evaluation. However, what made Qin Hao's face tremble was that the laborers pulling the young man's carriage were 3 divine dragons. Their bodies were as red as blood, and their bodies were burning with raging flames. They flew all the way and ran rampant. Each divine dragon exuded the aura of the divine path. Obviously, they were 3 demon immortals who had cast the heavenly wheel. This caused Qin Hao's heart to tremble the moment he laid eyes on the chariot. A dragon, a true divine dragon, an existence on the level of a demon god, was pulling the chariot of a flawless brat who had not even reached Nirvana realm. "Chu-san, why don't you get out of the way?" Zine's shout came and hit Qin Hao's eardrums heavily. The 3 fire dragons were demon immortals. Even if they did not attack, the power of a head-on collision was no small matter. Moreover, the path of the young man in the carriage just happened to be Qin Hao, who was standing in the middle of the street. However, it was too late. As soon as Zine's voice fell, a terrible dragon force descended in front of him. In an instant, Qin Hao's silver hair swayed wildly and was extremely messy. It was as if a storm was blowing in front of him, mixed with a terrible burning force. The power of the flames of the three demon immortals' fire dragons could be imagined. Qin Hao didn't move. He stretched out his palm and slammed it towards the chariot. Beneath his robes, countless fire particles swirled about as a blinding halo of light appeared around him. It was as though he had lost his physical form and transformed into a towering pillar of divine fire. In just an instant, the halo of light faded back into nothingness. Buzz! A huge emblem was born under Qin Hao's palm. Wisps of flames flowed like a curtain of flame between him and the dragon carriage, turning into a natural moat on the street. The three fire dragons suddenly felt the extreme fire intent, as if they did not expect Qin Hao's divine fire power to be so strong. While they were stunned, they hurriedly stopped. Suddenly, the carriage behind them lost its balance and crashed into the fire dragon in the middle. The fire dragon let out a howl and pushed its head forward. With a loud bang, it collided with the curtain of light under Qin Hao's palm. Immediately, sparks flew and the curtain of light shattered. Qin Hao seemed to have been hit by a moving mountain. He slid more than 10 meters from the ground and shattered the stone tiles on the ground. However, the carriage was also completely blocked. Because it happened so suddenly, as if it had never encountered such a thing before, the brave, young man who was driving the carriage fell down and flew over the heads of the three demon immortals like a dog pouncing on its prey. He landed right under Qin Hao's feet. My mother! The young man howled in pain. The blood-stained helmet fell from his head and rolled all the way until no one knew where it went. He raised his head with a grimace and raised his hands from the ground. His palms were red and trembling. It seemed like he had fallen quite hard. Are you okay? Qin Hao lowered his body and said with concern. Okay, your grandpa. The young man glared angrily and raised his hand to slap Qin Hao's face. He, young Master C, had never been in such a miserable situation in his life. Falling on the ground on the street, where would he put his face? His life of brilliance was completely ruined. Chapter 2033. Wulin Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Something caught my attention. A slap came at his face. Qin Hao immediately straightened his posture and dodged it. He said, "Why did you hit me for no reason?" The young man stood up from the ground and tidied up his clothes to maintain his valiant appearance. Seeing that Qin Hao dared to dodge, he shouted, "Hit? I still want to kill." As he spoke, he reached behind his back and pulled out a copper gong from nowhere. He threw it at Qin Hao. Buzz! A loud buzzing sound was heard. The copper gong emitted a strong metallic light and turned into a sharp blade. It slashed directly at Qin Hao. At this time, there was a teeth-numbing grinding sound in the air. The sound moved forward together with the blade and vaguely had the effect of messing up one's soul. Qin Hao's eyes flashed with a strange light. He thought to himself that it was a divine weapon. Moreover, this copper gong seemed to be of high quality and had the rhythm of messing up the soul. Unfortunately, the cultivation of the young man who activated the divine weapon was too low. The copper gong was also sealed with a strong seal, which sealed most of its power. It could not cause any harm to Qin Hao. The moment the blade slashed at him, Qin Hao slapped it with a backhand. Dang! The copper gong was directly shaken to the side and hit a restaurant. The terrifying blade directly embedded into the wall of the restaurant, causing a huge crack. Oh ho! The young man did not seem to expect that the person in front of him would dare to dodge and even fight back. He raised his hand and waved in the direction of the copper gong. The divine weapon produced a strong vibration and turned into a sharp light wheel that immediately flew back. The young man pointed at Qin Hao and the wheel blade relentlessly slashed at him. So arrogant and lawless. You attacked with a killing move. Is this how your elders taught you? Qin Hao's face was filled with displeasure. He stretched his right hand forward and knocked on the copper gong. Stop! Buzz! The spinning light was stuck in the middle and could not move forward. No matter how anxious the young man was, he could not control the copper gong anymore. Good boy, just you wait. Just you wait. The young man looked left and right, then turned and ran toward the broken car on the street. He took a divine spear from the car and held it with both hands. He walked with rhythmic steps and bravely rushed toward Qin Hao. He shouted, "Stab!" Whoosh! A glaring spear light from his hand. The effect was excellent. It was quite shocking. It was as if the spear could penetrate everything, and stab the silver-haired man's heart. Qin Hao looked on and shook his head slightly. The spear was indeed not bad, and it was also a divine artifact. Unfortunately, it was sealed like a gong, and most of its power was sealed. Even if Qin Hao stood there and allowed the youth to stab him, the youth would not be able to hurt his divine body. After all, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. How could a flawless emperor's Tao break through the defense of a deity wheel? Translation art translation Qin Hao casually spat out a sentence, and with a flick of his finger, a ray of light shot out and collided with the spear radiance. In an instant, the spear radiance shattered, and the spear-wielding youth suffered a violent impact. He lost his balance and fell to the ground in front of everyone. The young man pointed at Qin Hao and roared angrily at the 3 fire dragons. "Aya, this is pissing me off. What are you all looking at? Tear him apart." The 3 demon gods exchanged a glance with each other. In the next instant, the chains that bound the war chariot and their draconic bodies exploded into pieces. The void of the western divine region shook with astonishing draconic roars as they actually opened their gigantic mouths and lunged toward Qin Hao to swallow him whole. Danger! Tai Chu took a step forward, and Ancestor Chu, Qi Zhu, and Qin Xiaohe were also prepared to take action. However, at this moment, Xin shook his head at everyone, indicating that they should not interfere. The identity of the chicken nest youth driving the tattered war chariot was unknown, but from his attire and the fact that he was protected by a demon god, he was definitely the son of a great expert in the divine region. Since this place was close to the western capital, there was an 80% chance that he was related to City Lord Sikong. If a battle between gods was directly started, then the people of the Kunlun Sea would no longer be able to establish themselves in the divine region, because there would no longer be a place for them to stay. Moreover, although the 3 fire dragons had cultivated to the level of demon gods, the divine intent they emitted was very weak, and their cultivation couldn't be very high. Xin guessed that they should have just stepped into the divine way not long ago. From the looks of it, even if the 3 demon gods joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to shake Qin Hao's perfect heaven wheel. Therefore, they didn't need to interfere, they just needed to wait and see. They are simply too arrogant. Qin Hao raised his eyes and glanced at the 3 demon gods and fire dragons without any fear. The chicken nest youth style was a little too rampant. He even dared to act so recklessly in the divine region. Roar! A huge flaming figure smashed down, bringing along rolling flames. Qin Hao's body soared into the air before it, avoiding the dragon's claws. These 3 demon gods raised their huge dragon heads at the same time, looking towards the sky. Their powerful dragon claws shook, and their dragon bodies rose up, forming a pincer attack to surround Qin Hao. In an instant, the sky of the western divine region turned into a spectacular sea of fire, and there were human figures and dragon figures fighting fiercely in the sea of fire. At this moment, countless cultivators on the streets were shocked by this scene. They looked at the silver-haired figure in the sky who was flipping and moving in the sea of fire, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. "Who is that?" Someone trembled in fear and said, "Who dares to provoke the grandson of City Lord Sikong, young Master C? I'm not sure, but this person is really powerful." Facing the 3 demon dragons of Sikong City, he was able to deal with them so easily. He's not an ordinary heaven wheel expert. The person next to him evaluated. Many people nodded in succession. Fighting 1 against 3, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. The silver-haired man's figure was light, and his footsteps were ghostly. He shuttled through the net of attacks of the 3 demon gods with ease, as if he was playing with them. However, even if this person's ability wasn't ordinary, after offending City Lord Seekong, he wouldn't be able to leave safely. Is it someone from the Kunlun Sea? At this moment, a group of figures stepped out from the He Mansion. Although they were far away from where Qin Hao was fighting the 3 demon gods, the scene of the divine path exploding was extremely eye-catching, and they still saw it at a glance. The demon dragons of the Seekong family. Deacon Chui said with a serious expression, and then a smile appeared on his face. These 3 demon dragons were won by Daisakong from the law battle of the Zhenlong world. They were kept in Seekong City, and became his precious grandson's demon slaves. From the looks of it, the people of the Kunlun Sea had offended the little ancestor of the Seekong family. Father, should we? He Kan was about to speak. Young Master C was born fearless, and he was truly the little tyrant of the Western Divine Region. As long as he was in the infinite Divine Region, there was nothing he didn't dare to do. He even dared to provoke the direct descendants of the top forces of the Eastern Divine Region, Southern Divine Region, and Northern Divine Region. Now that he had run into this little tyrant of the Kunlun Sea, he was bound to suffer. He wanted to remind He Sun if he should go and help him. Don't worry about it. Let's go to the academy, He Sun said indifferently. Although his son had been taken in as a sword attendant by Deacon Chui, he still needed to register at the academy. As long as he could enter the academy, He Kan's future was limitless. As for the Kunlun Sea and young Master C, what did it have to do with He Sun? After a glance, the person who walked out of the He Mansion left immediately. It was as if Zien had never visited the He Mansion. At the edge of West Capital City, draconic roars shook the earth, and a sea of flames roiled. Countless tongues of flame fell from the sky and smashed into the streets below. Qin Hao used the fleet-foot step to skillfully circle around the 3 demonic dragons. It wasn't that he was afraid of losing, it was just that he didn't want to fight. In fact, Qin Hao knew that the young man with the bird's nest hair was no ordinary person. If he hurt his dragon, the consequences would be difficult to deal with. But at the same time, it was because of this that he wanted to show off in front of the young man. They had traveled all the way from the Heaven Wall domain. In order to help Wuk forge the heavenly wheel, they had come to this unfamiliar Avicii divine domain. And the actions of Supreme Crane had undoubtedly poured a bucket of cold water on them. Now that they had no one to rely on and no place to stay, they might as well take the unconventional path and take the initiative to provoke a big shot and attract the attention of the other party. Coincidentally, the appearance of the man with the bird's nest hair gave Qin Hao an opportunity. He didn't mean to offend him, he just wanted to use this opportunity to show off his worth. He believed that with his and Wuk's abilities, even the infinite divine region, which was full of geniuses, wouldn't be able to suppress their sharpness. He just needed to wait for an expert to recognize the value of his and Wuk's abilities. In fact, Qin Hao had indeed achieved his goal. The young man driving the broken chariot was extremely angry. He slowly realized that Qin Hao seemed to be a little interesting. He was fighting with his 3 demonic dragons, and yet he was still so relaxed. Interesting. Young Master C looked at the sky, his eyes flashing. In the divine region, heavenly wheel experts were nothing strange. However, there was no one who could fight 3 of them. Even if there was, they couldn't compare to Qin Hao, who could only defend and not attack, yet remain undefeated. What did this mean? Young Master C was indeed spoiled and arrogant, but he wasn't stupid at all. On the contrary, he was born in one of the most powerful families in the divine region and had seen many scenes. He was able to conclude that the silver-haired man's actual combat strength was definitely far superior to any of the demonic dragons. In a one-on-one fight, his dragons wouldn't be enough. By the same logic, even if Qin Hao were to fight against a god-level expert in the divine region, he would still be confident and at ease. Grandfather said that at the heavenly wheel level, only those with 3 meridians and above can completely suppress the opponent, unless the heavenly wheel's grade is extremely high. What grade is this guy's heavenly wheel? Young Master C looked at the battle in the sky, his fingers scratching his chin as he fell into deep thought. Qin Hao hadn't revealed his heavenly wheel yet, so naturally, he couldn't see through it. This made him even more curious. After fighting for a long time, Qin Hao was bored and said arrogantly to the 3 demonic dragons, "Back down. You guys are no match for me. Get someone stronger." Arrogant. Human cultivator, take a blow from us 3 brothers. The 3 demonic dragons couldn't help but be angry that they were looked down upon. After flying for a long time, their strong dragon bodies slowly descended and stepped on the tall building below. Their sharp dragon claws broke the roof. At this time, the demonic dragons' bodies in different positions glowed with the light of the heavenly wheel. For a moment, the dragon might in the void flourished. It was as if the 3 divine wills had merged, giving birth to an even larger divine dragon phantom that stood in front of Qin Hao. Dragon Will Divine Technique. Qin Hao looked a little serious. It was rare to see a divine technique that could merge the divine wills of heavenly wheel and combine them together. Its power should be extraordinary. Chapter 2034. Wisps of divine flames circled around his body as he activated the art of reincarnation. Qin Hao's aura was suffused with an almost undetectable draconic intent. At this moment, the divine dragon projection outside the West Capital was growing larger and larger. Its body was over 3,000 meters long, and its might was crushing down upon heaven and earth. The wills of the 3 demonic dragons continued to converge on the massive projection, making it appear more and more substantial. It was as if a body of flesh and blood had been forged. Roar! An earth-shattering roar rang out. The 3 demonic dragons' wills were connected, and their souls seemed to have been poured into the massive projection. They roared at Qin Hao with an incomparably turbulent sound wave that transformed into a terrifying hurricane that swept through heaven and earth. Instantly, the flames wreaked havoc, and the void was burned through, revealing a series of black holes. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Can he block it? Tai Chu's expression was filled with deep concern. It was true that the 3 demonic dragons had only just reached the divine Tao, but they were still at the divine Tao level. The divine will of Tianluan combined into one was extremely powerful, and ordinary Tianluan definitely wouldn't be able to block it. Even 2 meridian divine sigils would find it difficult to block it. Don't judge Chu-san as a normal person. The Tao of the Sword and the spatial will of the Seamless Realm won't be able to suppress his Tianlun. He's not in the same situation as us. Zine wasn't worried at all. If the newly minted god of Kunlun was defeated by the 3 demonic dragons, then it could only be said that he had misjudged Chu-san. Boom! The terrifying flaming hurricane swept towards Qin Hao. Even from very far away, Qin Hao could sense that terrifying heat. A faint scorching sensation appeared on his face, and streams of divine flames began to quickly revolve around his body. They moved faster and faster, enveloping his entire body and forming a red barrier. Outside the West Capital, countless cultivators were hiding in the corners of the streets and looking up at the sky. Their hearts were trembling violently. The flaming hurricane was incomparably massive. Would the silver-haired man be able to withstand it? Xiao Han, Wuk, and the others' palms were covered in a thin layer of sweat, and their hearts were beating at a much faster rate. They were also rather worried. Young Master C, who was standing on the ground, had a look of intense interest in his eyes. He stared intently, as if he was afraid that he would miss something. In his heart, he thought that if Qin Hao could take this blow and not die, he would be merciful and not care about the blasphemy the other had committed. However, he had to detain this person and keep him by his side as a hired thug. Boom! Crack! The terrifying hurricane collided with the tiny figures, as if it had struck everyone's heart. The scene was incomparably intense. Everyone saw that Qin Hao was like a red egg that had fallen into a river of molten lava. Facing the impact of the flames that could melt divine metal, he remained unmoved. However, it was only an instant before he was immediately swallowed up by the surging hurricane. Sigh, it's over. Another life. The crowd hiding in the corners of the street shook their heads and sighed. While they sympathized with him, they also felt hatred and fear towards the Sikong clan's little overlord. In the grand seamless divine region, unless it was the leader of those major powers, there was almost no one the little overlord didn't dare to provoke. Many lives and treasures had been destroyed in his hands, but the divine master didn't care. There was nothing he could do about it. He was Daesekong's grandson, so he could be considered a direct descendant of the divine master. Boring. Young Master C shook his head as he watched the lava divine river gradually disappear. At this moment, he had also lost track of Qin Hao's aura. He was slightly disappointed. He thought that the silver-haired man was amazing, but he overestimated him and died. Hey, he's with you, right? It's his bad luck that his cultivation is not good enough. Young Master C got into the crooked chariot and flipped it over a few times. He found a few divine crystals and threw them to Zien and the others. This is... Divine Master Tai Chu reached out to catch them. Suddenly, a powerful energy fluctuation came from his palm and reached his divine soul. Even his hands were trembling. Wuk, an illusion elder, looked at the divine crystals in Tai Chu's hand. Their eyes flashed with surprise. Such strong power of the sword way and the power of space. Thank you for your kindness, young master. I'll accept it. We'll accept it, Zien said with a smile. The divine power in these divine crystals was extremely strong. It was obvious that they had an extraordinary origin. Haha, the people around you are dead. It seems that you are not. Young Master C was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. Young Master C, be careful. Deafening sounds rang out from 3 different directions at the same time. The 3 dragons raised by the Sikong clan all flew toward young Master C as if they were fighting for their lives. Young Master C's legs trembled slightly. Feeling the aura behind him, he slowly turned around and saw a face not long ago. You're not dead yet? Shock mixed with a faint panic. These 2 emotions were vividly displayed on young Master C's face. He was not afraid, but when did Qin Hao come to his side? He did not sense it at all. The 3 dragons also did not sense it. Yes, I was born with a tough life. No one can take it away. Qin Hao stretched out his big hand, grabbed young Master C's neck, and lifted him up. Stop it, quickly. The 3 dragons flew over and saw this scene. They immediately stopped halfway and did not dare to move forward. You dare to hurt me? Let go. I'm going to suffocate. Young Master C held on to Qin Hao's wrist with both hands. His legs kicked wildly, unable to exert any strength. How can you be so reckless in broad daylight in the divine realm? You don't care about your family, right? Fine, I'll do it. With one hand, Qin Hao tore off the already tattered armor from young Master C's body. My heroic divine armor. Suffocation was not important. Having his clothes ripped off was simply asking for young Master C's life. He grabbed Qin Hao's wrist with one hand and made a futile struggle. His other hand tore at his face. His eyes were like torches as he gritted his teeth. He looked at Qin Hao as if he was the enemy who had killed his father. How can this piece of scrap metal be called a divine armor? Who gave you the courage to come here? Tearing off the armor was not enough. Qin Hao also tore off young Master C's underwear and even his pants. This scene shocked everyone into an uproar. "Take off my pants. Someone come quickly. Why aren't you holding him down?" Aya. Young Master C wanted to cry but had no tears. He was completely naked except for his boxer shorts, the red of which was especially eye-catching. Gradually, his anger turned into grief and indignation, which turned into humiliation. He was the little overlord of the Western Divine Region. When had he ever been treated like this? If the young masters of the Eastern Divine Region, Southern Divine Region, and Northern Divine Region found out about this, he would be too ashamed to face them. Qin Hao didn't care about any of this. He pressed the young man against the war chariot, pressed down on his head, and gave him a violent beating. The sound of slaps mixed with the miserable screams of the Western Divine Region's little overlord filled the street. When the three dragons saw this, they were stunned and did not know what to do for a moment. Moreover, they felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure in their hearts. "Take off my pants. You and I cannot live under the same sky. If you don't stop, I will scream for help. Quickly stop, you. Big brother, I was wrong. Please let me go." The screams turned into cries of pain, and the cries turned into begging for mercy. To the little overlord of the Western Divine Region, this day was branded into his soul, and he could not bear to look back. Zine and the rest laughed loudly. The cultivators on the streets stood up, and gradually, many heavenly wheel experts appeared in the sky. However, when they saw the little overlord of the Western Divine Region sobbing under the slaps of others, not a single person stopped him. Instead, they were laughing and commenting. "Satisfying. Even the little overlord has such a day. I wonder who that hero is." "He is the grandson of Daisakong who went berserk on the streets, ha ha." Loud laughter shook the sky. Young Master C, who was crying bitterly, felt that it was especially ear-piercing. He had never felt like this before. It was as if he had been abandoned by the world. Outside the Western capital, he, young Master C, was being violently beaten up, but he could not find anyone to help him. On the contrary, this scene was something that everyone had been waiting for many years. "Grandfather, grandfather, quickly come and save me." A deep sense of powerlessness dominated young Master C's soul. He had never felt so helpless before. The only thing he could do was to call for the old man who was born to dote on him like a god, the pillar of the Western Divine Region, Daisakong. Enough. A shout that had been suppressed for a long time resounded through the air. As if it had some kind of magic power, it interrupted Qin Hao's slap. In an instant, an incomparably vast divine pressure descended from the sky. Qin Hao raised his head and saw an incomparably dignified face with a white beard appear high in the sky. Lord Sikong. Tens of thousands of cultivators simultaneously bowed to the face that had appeared. Those heavenly wheel experts standing on the roofs of the buildings also slightly bowed to Daisakong. Qin Hao was slightly shocked. The guy under his palm was indeed of extraordinary origin. He was actually the son of the Western capital, Daisakong's grandson. At this moment, Qin Hao looked at City Lord Sikong's face and replied, "Enough? Even if Senior's grandson runs amok, if Junior's strength was not enough, wouldn't I have lost my life?" Daisakong had long been aware of the situation here, but he had not shown himself. Now that Qin Hao had beaten up his grandson, what if the other party came out and was not a match for him? "Humph, how I raise my grandson is not up to you to talk about." A glaring light flashed in the eyes of the dignified face with a white beard. A powerful will fell on Qin Hao's body. Qin Hao suddenly felt that his hand did not listen to him. His 5 fingers loosened, and he actually let go of the youth under his palm. Bastard! Young Master C's face was filled with tears of humiliation. The second after he pulled up his pants, he slapped Qin Hao. However, he did not get what he wanted. Zine's figure flashed and stood between the two of them, so this slap landed squarely on Zine's body. Satisfied? Zine said with a smile on his face. He did not care, but Qin Hao did not feel good in his heart. Young Master C's face was filled with anger. Today's humiliation was not something that could be satisfied with just a slap. Without another word, he raised the divine spear under his feet and stabbed towards Zine. Seems like the lesson was not enough. Qin Hao's heart was also filled with anger. Zine regarded him as his junior brother, and his senior brother took the slap. However, Zine still did not repent. With the arrival of a senior, his arrogance only increased. Qin Hao moved forward with the fleetfoot stride, and his golden finger directly pierced towards the divine spear in young Master C's hand. However, at this time, another powerful divine will descended and crushed Qin Hao's body. The power was so strong that Qin Hao stopped in his tracks and froze for a few seconds. "Senior Sikong, you've gone too far," Zine said. He lifted Qin Hao's shoulder and the two of them retreated, avoiding young Master C's attack. "Gone too far," the dignified white-bearded face said coldly. Divine light flashed in his eyes, and two dazzling sword lights shot out. Seeing this, Qi Zhu and Chu Zhu jumped up. The two of them slapped out at the same time, and a beam of divine fire collided with the sword lights. Then, the sharp light pierced through the divine fire of the two ancestral patriarchs of Kunlun without any hindrance, as if it was cutting through bamboo. It made a whistling sound and went straight for the ancestral patriarchs. "Dodge!" Qi Zhu was shocked. He dodged to the side at the same time with Chu Zhu. The two sides had tested each other's strength as soon as they exchanged blows. Chapter 2035. Daisakong's sword will was very strong. Although the Qi and Chu ancestors did not use their full strength, they could clearly feel that they were no match for him. As the two dodged to the side, the sword light flew forward unstoppably. Seeing this, Zine formed several seals with his hands. The divine light of the heavenly wheel suddenly flashed on his body, and his divine power extended like meridians. Unfortunately, it could not cover all parts of his body. "Great heavenly wheel," Qin Hao said. Zine could not perfectly inherit the mantle of the Supreme Venerable. He had only forged a saint-grade heavenly wheel, which was the same grade as the ancestors of the three great families in Kunlun. However, the strength of Zi Yin's will was clearly stronger than that of the three patriarchs. The Kunlun Si was refined by his father's will. Back then, when he battled Patriarch Lin, he had the advantage of the heavenly Tao. Moreover, he had the assistance of the Flower Empress, which allowed him to crush Patriarch Lin and give others a sense of dominance. "Go!" Zine spat out a deep shout. He slapped his palms forward, and the green divine power condensed into two solid mountain sea stones. They were like two heavy punches that smashed into Daisakong's sword will. Bang bang! Two explosions sounded. The mountain sea stones shattered and the sword will collapsed. Zine seemed to have suffered a strong impact. He stepped back and barely managed to stand firm. He felt that his inner palace was overturned. As expected of a four-vein heavenly wheel expert, Zi-Yin said solemnly. The white-bearded face that appeared in the void was merely a wisp of Sikong the Great's will. It was not his true self. Even so, he was no match for his opponent. Even if he was not suppressed by the heavenly path of the deity realm, Zi-Yin would not be able to win. Qin Hao felt a ripple in his heart. The foundation of cultivation was indeed very important to the heavenly wheel. Daisakong's divine power was profound, and the grade of his heavenly wheel was not below that of his senior brother. Thinking of this, Qin Hao's body flowed with brilliance, and a layer of light faintly appeared. "This old man is very strong. Don't be impulsive." Zine shook his head at Qin Hao and opened his mouth to stop him. Qin Hao's sky wheel was too prominent and should not be exposed so easily. "What's wrong? Are you at your wits' end? Continue to resist?" Young Master C couldn't help but become arrogant when he saw that his grandfather was so awe-inspiring and easily suppressed 3 heavenly wheel realm cultivators. Senior Seekong, we came from the celestial oyster realm to borrow the seamless divine domain's heavenly Tao sword intent. We didn't intentionally come into conflict with young Master C. Zine explained. I don't care where you're from. If I don't punish you for what you did today, you're not Daisakong of the celestial realm. Men, take them all back to the western capital, City Lord Seekong said in a dignified tone before disappearing. Soon after, a group of figures appeared here. They were all uniformed, and they were all West Capital City guards with immortal swords on their back. The auras they gave off were extremely cold, and the 2 people leading the group had divine light flowing around their bodies. Everyone, come with us to West Capital City, one of them said. Zine and the others exchanged glances, and they all let go of their resistance. They were surrounded by the West Capital City guards, and they flew toward Seekong City. Humph. Young Master C raised his head proudly as if he were showing off to the others. He raised his divine spear and followed along. The 3 demonic dragons righted the overturned carriage and pulled it back. Soon, peace returned to this place. If it weren't for the massive scars left behind, it would be as if a battle had never taken place. The Western Capital, also known as the Western Divine Sky, was the territory overseen by Daisakong of the Celestial Realm. Daisakong's lineage had an extremely deep relationship with the Seamless Divine Master. It was said that when the Seamless Academy was first established, the current Seekong was already a follower of the Seamless Sword God and was the Divine Master's loyal servant. Later on, the Seamless Sword God's heavenly wheel changed, and he became a Divine Master and established the Seamless Sword Realm. After that, he ordered Seekong to leave and cultivate on his own. After Seekong left the Seamless Academy, he took root in the Western Divine region and built Seekong City. He made a name for himself, but his relationship with the Seamless Sword God never grew distant. In fact, he even sent his son to the Seamless Academy to continue managing the orthodoxy for his master. Right now, the son of City Lord Seekong was a high-ranking member of the Academy, and his cultivation was extremely high. However, his youngest grandson, young Master C, was born with a very high status, and he often caused trouble and caused others to worry. Daisakong was also having a headache over this. Since his son was in charge of the academy, he didn't have much time to discipline him. Daisakong also doted on his grandson a lot, so he ended up with an arrogant and unreasonable personality. His grandson had caused a lot of trouble and caused the entire divine region to be in chaos. There was no cultivator who didn't fear him, but every time he caused trouble, Daisakong would personally take the blame. He would apologize and make up for it with a lot of money. In short, he didn't let the victims suffer. Divine Master Seamless naturally knew about this, but considering his relationship with Seekong, he chose to turn a blind eye. Moreover, in the divine region, the little overlord of the Seekong family couldn't cause any big trouble. When Qin Hao and his group arrived at the western capital and landed in Seekong City, they were immediately shocked by the majestic city. As far as the eye could see, there were magnificent palaces and magnificent buildings. It was luxurious and looked like a real city of gods. Compared to the Kunlun Sea, Seekong City was many times more noble. Of course, it also lacked the celestial aura of the Kunlun Sea. Daisakong, I've brought them. Outside the Seekong Hall, the Western Capital's guards escorted the people of the Kunlun Sea to this place. The heavenly wheel expert leading them bowed to the hall. Let them in. A dignified and deep voice resounded from the hall. Then, the expert leading the guards made a please gesture to Zine's group. Zine's group helplessly stepped into the hall. Greetings, Daisakong. Everyone bowed to the person above them. At this moment, a figure stood at the very end of the hall. He had one hand behind his back and the other hand was holding an ancient book. He was reading it with great interest. "Speak, how should I punish you?" Daisakong asked. His back was facing the people below the hall. His voice was very calm. "Senior Sikong, you can't blame us for this matter, right?" Qin Hao asked. The old man's divine will was so strong that he should know what happened outside the western capital. "Yes, I don't blame you. However, you stripped Si Huan's clothes and humiliated him in front of everyone. Have you ever considered the old man's face?" Sikong said in a low voice. He slowly turned around. His white beard and long hair were tied together into a braid that hung down his back. His face was as dignified as it had been outside the city. "But," Qin Hao still wanted to argue. Daisakong said, "I don't care who you are. Once you're in the seamless divine domain, you have to follow the rules here. These are the laws of the great desolate world. Even if the heavenly Ho God comes and sees you beating up my grandson, he won't be able to say anything. We'll let Daisakong deal with it," Zine said directly. "You've got some backbone." "Fine." Daisakong chuckled. He shouted towards the outside of the hall, "Take them to the dungeon first. I'll think about it before I deal with them." "Yes." The sound of footsteps could be heard. A group of West Capitol guards walked into the hall. When Zine's group saw this, they silently followed the West Capitol guards out. "Si Huan, get the hell in here!" Daisakong roared. At this moment, as Qin Hao and the others were taken away, young Master Si, whose clothes were disheveled, dragged his broken armor into the hall with his head lowered. He came to Sikong One and said, "Grandpa, I was wrong." Daisakong looked surprised. Did he just admit it? "I'm a disappointment. I've embarrassed you and the Divine Master great-grandfather. I'll work hard in the future and try to reach the divine level as soon as possible. Then, I'll beat up everyone in the divine domain, including the Eastern Immortal Sky, the Big Dipper Mountain, and the Southern College. Speaking of which, you can't blame me for what happened today. You put such a strong restriction on the divine artifact. How could I unleash their power? Can you blame me?" Young Master C raised his head. "Then it's my fault, you little brat." Daisakong was furious. He lightly hit young Master C's head with the ancient book in his hand. He didn't care if young Master C dodged. He sighed and said, "Tell me, what do you want to do with those people? I don't care about the others, but I can't let that one off so easily." Young Master C was furious. "Kill him?" Daisakong's eyes darkened. "No, no, no. It's a pity to kill him. It's too easy for him. Let's trap them for a while. I'll think of a way to control him." Young Master C smiled slyly. "Do as you wish." Daisakong turned his back. He read his book and muttered to himself. He also felt that it was a pity to kill Qin Hao. It seemed that the young man's talent was good. However, he couldn't unleash his full strength in the battle with the three-headed demon dragon. He should find a time to try again. Perhaps he could be a useful talent. Young Master C rubbed his nose happily and turned to leave. Since his grandfather had agreed, then Qin Hao's life was in his hands. He didn't believe that his grandfather wouldn't agree when the time came. Dungeon. It was cold and damp. Qin Hao and the others were imprisoned here. The fence that trapped them was made of divine iron. Moreover, the space outside the fence was filled with dense sword light. The divine intent that these sword light emitted was extremely powerful. Any one of them wasn't something that Tianluan could easily withstand. The Sikong clan's dungeon is much more powerful than the Kunlun Sea. Zine sat on the ground. Everyone around him was meditating. Although the conditions in the dungeon weren't good, fortunately, the 12 of them didn't separate. "Senior brother, how will Daisakong deal with us?" Qin Hao asked. "How would I know?" Zine glared at Qin Hao with a resentful expression. It was all Qin Hao's fault. He had told him not to show off. Great, now he was trapped in the dungeon. "No matter how they deal with us, They don't have the right to decide the life and death of the Kunlun Sea. Chizu said. The Kunlun Sea was different from the other heavenly daos. Because of the exalted, the heavenly king deity paid special attention to it. Once he knew that they were trapped by the seamless realm, he would definitely come to rescue them. We are indeed people of the Kunlun Sea, but it seems that you aren't, Qin Hao said to Chizu. Chizu couldn't help but tremble. He smiled apologetically and said, I serve the Kunlun deity as my master. How can I not be considered a person of the Kunlun Sea? You can't abandon me. Look at your dog face. Chizu glanced at Chizu. How disgusting. Your dog face isn't any better than mine. Chizu coldly snorted and turned his head to the side. This Chu clan was really cowardly. Why didn't they dare to go all the way? Back then, if it wasn't for the fact that the Qi clan was blind and colluded with Lindu, if it was Chizu standing in the Chu clan's position, he would definitely fight to the end. I still don't know how long they will lock us up for. Let's cultivate, Ziyin said as he slowly closed his eyes. Spots of divine light flowed around his body. He could feel that the will pressing down on him was getting stronger and stronger. Because they had not gone to the heavenly tone pavilion, they could only rely on their cultivation to resist the suppression of the heavenly might of the infinite divine realm. Otherwise, their strength would continue to decline, and the consequences would be very serious. Chapter 2036. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The people of Kunlun Sea were trapped in the dungeon of the sea capital. Other than cultivating, they could do nothing else. During this time, the sea capital did not send anyone to check on them. It was as if they had ignored their existence and left them to their own devices. At this moment, Ziyin and the others were meditating in the cold and damp dungeon. Their faces were pale, and their bodies were flowing with spots of divine light. It was as if they were isolated from space, forming a divine barrier to resist the sword will of the seamless heavenly Tao. Qin Hao, Xiao Han, Wuk, and Illusion Sovereign were in a much better situation. They were all proficient in the way of the sword. Moreover, they had the power of the original realm, so the influence was not very obvious, especially Illusion Sovereign. He even let go of himself and allowed the spatial will of the heavenly Tao to suppress him. He used the pressure of the heavenly Tao to cultivate. He realized that the spatial will of the seamless world was not much weaker than that of the Donghuang world. Cultivating here was like a fish in water. It was extremely comfortable. However, Ziyin and the others were not in a good situation. A cold wind blew in the dungeon. Qin Hao looked silently and saw that Ziyin's meditating body was trembling slightly. He could not help but worry. The pressure of the heavenly Tao would become stronger and stronger. The heavenly wheel would not be able to resist it. If this continued, their bodies and souls would not be able to take it. Qin Hao had also thought of using the perfect heavenly wheel to communicate with the seamless heavenly Tao to relieve the pressure on Ziyin and the others. However, this idea was rejected by Ziyin on the spot. Now that they were in the seamless world, they were very far away from the Tianhou divine world. People's hearts were unpredictable, and they had to hide a little. Daisakong was very shrewd, and it was difficult to distinguish between good and evil. If Qin Hao released the heavenly wheel to resonate with the heavenly Tao, he would definitely notice it. No one could predict what the outcome would be. Senior Sikong, you imprisoned us here and ignored us. Now, my senior brother's body is very weak. He urgently needs to go to the Heavenly Book Pavilion. I hope that Senior can let us go. Qin Hao stood up and shouted towards the outside of the prison. The sound spread out, and in the dungeon, there was a dense rhythm of sword sounds. In an instant, the sword wills floating in the space outside the dungeon pointed at Qin Hao, as if he would be pierced by thousands of swords if he moved even a little. The sword intent outside the prison can sense the changes in our emotions. Sit down. Zine said with a weak breath. His lips were dry and cracked. When a martial artist entered the path of martial arts and transcended the mortal world, he could enter the state of inedia. There was no need for him to consume food in the mortal world. When he reached the divine level, he did not need to do so. As long as his divine source was not destroyed, his divine power would be able to maintain his youth forever. For Zine to undergo such a change, it was obvious that the pressure he was enduring from the heavenly Tao was very strong. His divine power could not hold on for much longer. But if this continues, senior apprentice brothers, all of you will run out of divine sources. Qin Hao said. He was blaming himself in his heart. Perhaps he had done something wrong. The Sikong Temple is reinforced by divine power. No matter how loud you shout, my grandfather can't hear you. Why don't you beg me instead? At this moment there was a playful laughter. The young master of Sikong City, young Master C, held his head high and his hands behind his back. He swaggered into the dungeon. The sword wheels floating in the space moved aside and made a path for him. Beg you. Qin Hao glanced at young Master C coldly. Will you let us go? It was not that simple. Maybe. Why don't you try kneeling down and begging me? As long as your attitude is good, I can consider it. Young Master C smiled. He has never had the habit of kneeling in his life. Don't look at me, I don't either. Wuk said with his eyes closed. It's okay. Habits are formed slowly. Young Master C looked around the dungeon and swept his gaze across everyone in Kunlun Sea, as if encouraging them to kneel. Unfortunately, no one responded. Even Chu Zhu and Chi Zhu looked at him coldly and closed their eyes again. They had stepped into the celestial wheel realm and cultivated for more than 10,000 years. They were the ancestors of the Kunlun aristocratic families. No matter what, they could not bow down to an unblemished brat. You're quite stubborn. Okay, then you can continue to stay here. Let's see who gives up first. Young Master C's face was filled with strong dissatisfaction. He turned around and left angrily. Wait, Qin Hao said. Hearing this, young Master C immediately stopped. He turned around and smiled. Have you changed your mind? It's impossible to kneel. You can state other conditions, Qin Hao said. Daisakong said that he would punish them, but he only imprisoned them. If he really intended to punish them severely, it would not take so long. This meant that he did not mean to punish them at all. Let me think about it. Young Master C scratched his chin and raised his head with a thoughtful expression. Then his eyes flashed. He smiled slyly at Qin Hao. That day, I saw that your cultivation was not bad. How much strength did you use when you fought with the three-headed demon dragon? Less than 10%. Qin Hao said frankly. Young Master C pursed his lips. You're exaggerating. You're more capable than me. What do you think, young Master C? Qin Hao asked. How would I know? Young Master C replied. He was not a roundworm in Qin Hao's stomach. How about this? Let me out to test it out. If I can defeat the 3 demon immortals of your residence in one move, can young Master C speak up for us and ask Daisakong to release everyone from the dungeon? Qin Hao said. That's a good idea. Sure. Young Master C nodded. Qin Hao pointed at the cell and the sword intent floating outside the cell. Let him out. Young Master C shouted. Whoosh. As his voice fell, the bars made of divine iron slowly rose. The flashing sword light outside began to tremble restlessly. Although it did not attack Qin Hao, it maintained an attacking posture to prevent Zine and the others from escaping. Don't stare at the sword intent. Follow me. Young Master C said. Qin Hao, Xiao Han, and the others exchanged glances before stepping out and following young Master C. They avoided the sword intent floating outside the cell and ignored it with their telekinesis. As long as they did not pay too much attention, the sword intent outside the cell would not be hostile. Of course, the main reason was that young Master C was present. Soon, the two stepped out of the dark and damp dungeon. Qin Hao saw the light again. The warm light shone on his body, making him feel exceptionally comfortable. Even his soul had a warm and comfortable feeling. Outside the cell, there were several guards from Seekong City. Their auras were relatively strong, and they were even stronger than the leader of the guards who had escorted them back to the city. It could be seen that Seekong City was full of experts. Even heavenly wheel experts like this were not few in number in the entire divine realm. After all, this was the core of a large world and the lifeline of hundreds of planes surrounding it. If the divine wilderness had not been invaded by the foreign army and the Yuan Ling era had not ended, I wonder if it would have developed into the seamless divine domain. Qin Hao sighed. During the Yuan Ling era, there were more than 20 heavenly wheel experts in the divine wilderness. According to their heavenly wheel grades, the strongest representative of these 20 people, Yan Ming, was indeed qualified to become a divine master and even the divine king of the original domain. In that case, the divine wilderness would definitely be like the seamless academy, expanding infinitely and giving birth to many planes. Thus, millions of emperors would have the opportunity to advance to the divine path and become the second seamless divine domain, or even surpass the scale of the seamless divine domain. It was a pity that such a great era had sadly fallen. Young Master C, why did you bring me here? Qin Hao looked puzzled as he followed young Master C forward. Their current location was not some training hall, but an extremely unique palace in the city. It seemed to be young Master C's personal territory. As for your abilities, I'm well aware of them. Let's not talk about whether you used 10% or 20% of your power back then. In short, if you were to fight one-on-one, those 3 dragons would definitely not be your match. You wouldn't even have a chance to get close to them. Young Master C sat on a rock in the palace and took out a fruit pit from his pocket and ate it with relish. Qin Hao's brows knitted slightly. So, I don't doubt your ability. Show me a few moves. For example, the miraculous shadowless ghost movement technique you executed that day. If I'm satisfied, I'll beg grandfather to release your companions. Young Master C crossed his legs. Okay. Qin Hao understood now. He executed the Fleetfoot steps without using a trace of Dao insight. His movement technique floated past young Master C's eyes, sometimes swift like the wind, sometimes shaking like the waves. It contained a feeling of crushing heaven's might, and it was boundlessly profound. Young Master C gradually became enthralled and completely forgot about the fruit pit in his palm. His expression and movements froze, and he couldn't take his eyes off it. He realized that even though Qin Hao didn't use a trace of Dao Insight's divine power, his footsteps were extremely exquisite. He could completely immerse himself in it and imagine the spectacular scene after Qin Hao used his divine power. Wonderful, truly wonderful. After images flew past his eyes, and young Master C was full of praise. At this time, he couldn't catch Qin Hao's aura at all, and he couldn't tell which shadow was the real body. Without using Dao Insight's divine power, Qin Hao was already so powerful. One could imagine what kind of scene it would be if Qin Hao released Tianluan and poured his divine power into his movement technique. Thinking of this, young Master C's eyes flickered more and more as if he had discovered a treasure. He said, "Stop." As if a gust of wind had stopped in front of him, Qin Hao appeared in front of young Master C and said, "Satisfied?" "Ahem, although it's not as powerful as our Seekong clan's divine technique, it's barely enough." Young Master C said, "If that's the case, can young Master C plead with Senior Seekong?" Qin Hao was concerned about the situation of Zien and the others. Young Master C shook his head. "Your performance has indeed met my expectations, but why should I help you? Speak frankly, what exactly do you want?" Qin Hao said. "Be my fighter and stay by my side. Do whatever I ask you to do." Young Master C stood up from the stone and said seriously. In other words, I'll be responsible for bringing you around freely? Qin Hao said. That's the effect. Young Master C laughed. I don't like being someone's subordinate. Qin Hao refused. Young Master C's laughter stopped, and the corner of his mouth twitched a few times. You can acknowledge me as your big brother. In the future, I'll protect you in the seamless divine territory. Are you sure? The corner of Qin Hao's mouth rose. You look quite ruthless, but why are you so wishy-washy? To tell you the truth, I've lived for so long and have yet to have a true brother. They're not worthy. As long as you're of one heart with me, I'll repay you tenfold, no, 20-fold. Young Master C promised loudly. All right, big brother, please accept a bow from me. Qin Hao cupped his fists and said, I'm Li Chuji. In the future, I'll rely on big brother young Master C to take care of the seamless divine territory. Young Master C is what the people of the divine territory call me. My name is Si Huan. Ha ha. Good brother. Si Huan raised his hand and patted Qin Hao's shoulder happily. Big brother, you guys. My senior brothers are still in the dungeon. Qin Hao hesitated. Si Huan rolled his eyes and said, To tell you the truth, brother, I've never had my pants pulled out and beaten on the street in my life. You're the first. At that time, I was very angry, so I deliberately asked the old man to lock you guys in the dungeon. I know very well that you guys came from the outside world and can't withstand the will of the heavenly Tao in the seamless divine territory for too long, so this is the current situation. Qin Hao was also a smart person. Ha, in 2 days I'll go ask Grandpa to let you guys go. After all, I've said too many harsh words, so I need to go through the formalities. Come, let's go drink. Si Huan raised his arm and put it on Qin Hao's shoulder, walking toward a small building in the palace park. Because of their height, Si Huan was more than a head shorter than Qin Hao, so from the back, the two looked strange. Si Huan's walking posture was one side high and the other low, as if half of his body was hanging on Qin Hao's shoulder. It was quite indecent. Chapter 2037. After the farce, Si Huan had changed from enemies to brothers who followed her wherever she went. These days, no matter where she went, she would always bring Qin Hao with her. The change in her attitude could be said to be great, which subverted the eyes of the guards in the West capital. This could be considered as friendship grows from an exchange of blows. However, it was hard to say whether the two of them, who seemed to be very close, really saw each other as brothers. A few days later, as promised, Si Huan pleaded with Daisakong and released Ziyin and the others from the dungeon. However, he still restricted their freedom of movement and locked them up in a courtyard in the Sikong residence. Guards were arranged to keep watch outside. Even so, the environment was much better than being locked up in the dungeon. Senior brother, after a while, when I get closer to young Master C, I will ask him to remove the guards and bring you to the Heavenly Book Pavilion. In the courtyard, Qin Hao looked at everyone who was meditating. Ziyin's condition did not improve after leaving the dungeon. The pressure from the will of Heavenly Tao was becoming more and more obvious on everyone's body. Everyone's aura had weakened by close to 50%. It's okay, I can still hold on. You, on the other hand, are doing well in the Sikong residence. I heard the guards of the West capital call you lordly. Your status is not bad. Ziyin looked up slightly and smiled weakly. In fact, this was a good thing. The closer Qin Hao was to the little overlord of the West capital, the easier it would be for them to do things in the divine plane. It seemed that provoking Si Huan back then was effective. Hee. Qin Hao smiled and said, As for the academy, with the little overlord's help, it should not be a problem for Wuk to get a chance to enter. Si Huan was quite famous in the divine plane. Even if they did not care about him, the Seamless Academy would also care about Daisakong. Moreover, Qin Hao had heard that Si Huan's parents were also working in the academy. It all depended on whether Wuk met the requirements. Qin Hao was very confident about this. I will work hard in my cultivation. Before I enter the academy, I will strive to strengthen my sword will of the laws. Wuk said. Qin Hao patted Wuk's shoulder in relief. Chu San, come here quickly. At this moment, a weak voice called out. Qin Hao looked over and saw half a head peeking out from the wall of the courtyard. The person was extremely cautious, just like a thief. However, the person's curly red hair was extremely conspicuous, and Qin Hao immediately recognized him. Young Master Si. Qin Hao was puzzled. Why was he so careful in his own residence? Why didn't he come in? You go first, Xin said. Young Master Si must have something to do. Qin Hao nodded and glanced at Xiao Han. Xiao Han gestured for him not to worry about the situation here. Then, Qin Hao got up and walked out of the courtyard. Greetings, Lordly. The 4 guards at the door took the initiative to talk. Brothers, thank you for protecting my senior brother. Thank you for your hard work. Qin Hao said. Not at all. It's my duty. The 4 guards smiled kindly. Qin Hao nodded in response and walked along the courtyard wall to the side. He saw Si Huan waiting there. Why did you come out from the main entrance? Si Huan asked anxiously. He quickly glanced around and found that he did not attract the attention of the guards in the residence. What's the matter? Why do you need to be so careful? Qin Hao asked curiously. Don't ask first. Follow me. Si Huan grabbed Qin Hao and ran. He deliberately took the small path to avoid the patrol team of the Sikong residence. When they returned to the independent palace, he pulled out a big box from under the bed in the room and opened it. Change your clothes. As he spoke, he changed into a set of clothes very quickly. Night clothes. Qin Hao looked at Si Huan's black clothes and was puzzled. What are you going to do? I'm going to take you to a good place. Don't tell anyone, especially my grandfather. Si Huan urged nervously. He pointed to the remaining set of clothes in the box. Change quickly. Qin Hao was speechless. He guessed that it was most likely not something good. However, since he had decided to be the brother of the little tyrant of the western capital, he would naturally shoulder the burden together. Thus, he took off his jacket and put on the other set of night clothes in the box. When Qin Hao was dressed, his tall and well-proportioned body coupled with his outstanding height made his temperament much stronger than Si Huan's. He vaguely emitted a fierce aura. TSK, this temperament. Young Master Si looked at Qin Hao with envy. His body was excellent. Where are we going? Qin Hao asked. Eastern Immortal Heaven. Si Huan said a name. The number 1 power in the Eastern Divine Region. Qin Hao was surprised. That's right, good brother. Use your amazing phantom shadow movement skill and bring me along. Be careful not to leak your aura. I'll take you to broaden your horizons. Si Huan's face was full of excitement. All right. Qin Hao was helpless. Eastern Immortal Heaven was extremely far from the Western Divine Region. One was at the easternmost part of the Divine Region, while the other was at the westernmost part. They would pass by the core of the Divine Region, the Seamless Academy. With such a long distance, not only would they have to cross the Divine Region, there would also be countless Heavenly Wheel experts along the way. It would be extremely difficult to not be discovered. Qin Hao also did not have absolute confidence, but as long as they were careful, it should not be a big problem. Let's go. Qin Hao retracted his aura and only relied on his movement skill to move forward. He placed his hand on Si Huan's shoulder and carried him out. He turned into a pitch-black shadow and disappeared into the corner of the palace in the blink of an eye. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air and was nowhere to be found. After leaving Si Shaoyuan, Qin Hao walked along the water and avoided the patrols of the West Capital along the back of the small street. He safely left Sikong City and headed east, heading straight for the eastern deity sky of the infinite domain. The eastern immortal heaven was extremely large and had many disciples. Their overall strength was only above the western capital, but not below. Most importantly, the cultivators of the eastern immortal heaven were all women. It was rumored that the number one person in the eastern immortal heaven, the eastern victory immortal, was the number one person below the divine master realm. His heavenly wheel divine power was the strongest in the entire divine region. Qin Hao did not know why Si Huan was going to the eastern immortal heaven. According to the actions of the western capital's little overlord, it was definitely not something good. Therefore, Qin Hao was under a lot of pressure on this trip. After all, the eastern immortal heaven was guarded by an omnipotent expert from the divine region. Daisakong's strength was so strong that he could interfere with Qin Hao's divine soul and restrict the circulation of divine techniques and divine power with just a thought. Moreover, the Eastern Victory Immortal's cultivation was above Daisakong's. One could imagine how terrifying he was. Brother Chu San is amazing. With this speed, in the entire seamless divine region, other than the divine masters, there is no heavenly wheel expert who can catch up to you without activating his heavenly wheel divine power. Huge images flashed in front of Si Huan's eyes as the huge buildings in the divine region flew behind him. He felt that Qin Hao's movement skill had reached an indescribable level. He had never seen someone like Qin Hao in the seamless divine region. Brother Huan, just don't trick me. Qin Hao had a bad feeling in his heart. Don't worry, I've never done anything to trick my brothers. I'll only let my brothers enjoy. Si Huan guaranteed. I hope so. Qin Hao was unsure. The sword sun set in the western mountains. In the divine region, the glaring light gradually disappeared into the darkness. A black curtain that swallowed the sky covered everything. At this moment, Daisakong sat majestically in the western capital divine palace. He held a luminous pearl in his palm and looked at it with his bright eyes. Through the pearl's light, he could clearly see Qin Hao's shadow and location. Lord Sikong, this person's movement skill is incomparably mysterious. Just based on this move alone, he is indeed a talent. Beside him, an extremely majestic figure stood tall. It was the commander of the Western Capital's Imperial Guards, the first heavenly wheel expert, Zhang Ji. Of course, this first heavenly wheel expert had to throw Daisakong out of the picture in advance. At this moment, Zhang Ji was also looking at the luminous pearl. The more he looked, the more shocked he became. He felt a deep chill from Qin Hao's body. If he hadn't seen this movement skill with his own eyes, it would have only existed in his dreams. Zhang Ji knew very well that if they hadn't known about Si Huan's plan in advance and planted a divine imprint on Si Huan that could resonate with the divine concealment pearl, it would have been very difficult to discover that Qin Hao had already left the western divine region. This silver-haired youth was terrifying. From what I know, no one in the Kunlun Sea or the heavenly Ho divine region focuses on cultivating a divine movement skill. Where did this person come from? Old man Sikong looked puzzled. He had already investigated the identity of Ziyin and the others. They were the leaders of the heavenly Ho divine realm's Kunlun plane. Once upon a time, Kunlun was a place that couldn't be underestimated. Unfortunately, that famous alchemist of the desolate era had fallen. Daisakong was a loyal servant of the divine master of Avicii. He was very experienced and ruthless. There was almost nothing he couldn't take care of. His network of spies and connections was very large. Therefore, when he learned that Ziyin was the current sect master of the Kunlun Sea, he wasn't too surprised. Daisakong couldn't see through Qin Hao at all. He couldn't find out anything about his background. I wonder which forbidden area of the Eastern Immortal Heaven young Master Si will bring Li Chuji to. I'm looking forward to it, Zhang Xian said. Si Huan wasn't as bad as the outside world thought. In reality, Daisakong's grandson was very smart. He brought Li Chuji out to test him. I hope the trouble won't be too big. Daisakong sighed. Otherwise, he would be in trouble again. The change between day and night in the Avicii divine realm was much longer than in ordinary planes. Qin Hao and Si Huan didn't encounter any obstacles except for the time they wasted passing by the Seamless Academy. They easily slipped under the noses of a large number of heavenly wheel experts. According to the time in the divine wilderness, it took him about 2 days to reach the eastern divine region. However, the sky of the Avicii divine realm was still dark. Do you see the bright balls of light in front of us? That's the eastern immortal heaven. Be careful. Si Huan pointed in a direction. Clusters of sparks flickered in that area. They looked like stars in the night sky, especially sacred and conspicuous. Qin Hao slowed down a little and used his turtle aura to its limit. His body was almost completely devoid of human aura as he advanced toward the eastern immortal heaven with extra caution. Wisps of fiery patterns appeared on his eyelids. In this pitch-black night, he could clearly see the number 1 orthodoxy's sacred ground of the eastern divine region. Surrounded by mountains and ancient palaces, waterfalls from the 9th heaven rumbled. The entire eastern deity heaven was filled with beautiful mountains and beautiful waters. It was like a paradise on earth. Nothing more beautiful could be imagined. It was a residence of women, after all. Compared to the luxurious West capital city, this place was even more beautiful than the Kunlun Sea. Although the Kunlun Sea was also ethereal, it wasn't as realistic as the eastern immortal heaven. Where are we going? Qin Hao's voice entered Si Huan's ears through consciousness. They were currently in the eastern immortal heavens territory. They had come uninvited in the middle of the night and trespassed into the cultivation holy land of a fairy maiden. They were no different from thieves. If they were discovered, their morals and character would be destroyed. Chapter 2038. Do you see that spirit waterfall? Let's go over there. Si Huan pointed in a direction in the night sky. There were many spirit waterfalls in the eastern deity's sky. They were like silvery silk floating in the mountains. The spirit waterfall that Si Huan pointed to was located at an extremely high altitude, which was completely in the core of the eastern deity's sky. Qin Hao raised his guard and stepped lightly on the cliff with the fleet-foot step. He carried Si Huan and jumped between the mountain peaks. When his feet landed, there was almost no sound. The timing, distance, environment, and movement technique were all very accurate. The two of them did not attract anyone's attention as they moved forward. They gradually approached the spirit waterfall and climbed higher and higher. Qin Hao felt that the environment of the eastern deity sky was exceptionally cold. The higher they went, the faster the temperature dropped. Along the way, he saw that many spirit waterfalls were covered in ice, and water flowed continuously under the ice. This seemed to be a characteristic of the sect. It could also be related to the cultivation of the people of the eastern deity sky. When they got close to the tallest spirit waterfall, the bone-chilling cold attacked their bodies. Their blood and soul were corroded by the cold. Even their wills felt like they were being frozen. Qin Hao's limbs were slightly stiff, and his movements were not as good as before. His speed instantly slowed down. It's really cold. Si Huan's 2 rows of teeth chattered. His body trembled slightly under Qin Hao's palm. A warm current flowed in his heart and wrapped around his body, unknowingly resisting the cold that pervaded the entire eastern deity sky. If he had not prepared well before coming, he probably would not have been able to withstand it. The sound of flowing water could be heard clearly. On this extremely high altitude, the huge spirit waterfall was covered in ice that was 9 feet thick. It was extremely spectacular, and below the spirit waterfall was a cold pond. The laughter of women and the sound of them playing in the water was crisp and pleasant. This place is... Qin Hao hid behind a huge boulder as he stared at the beautiful bodies in the cold lake in front of him. Anger involuntarily surfaced on his face. Si Huan actually dragged him here to watch the female disciples of the Eastern Celestial sect bathe. Their arms were like jade, their backs were smooth, and as they joked around with their fellow disciples, the water droplets that splashed up from the cold lake glided across their bodies. Especially when Qin Hao saw those women wearing light gauze sitting on the edge of the cold pond. Their long, white legs stretched out from under their almost completely transparent clothes. To him, it was no different from being naked. Thus, he immediately turned his head and body around. A pair of powerful palms grabbed Si Huan's neck. Gritting his teeth, he said in a deep voice, "You tricked me." Now, he and Si Huan were on the other side of the cold pond. The distance between them was very close. Fortunately, it was dark and there was a large rock to hide them. Moreover, the cold air from the cold pond was very strong. It was very good for concealment. Otherwise, it would be difficult to guarantee that they would not be discovered. Heavy breathing could be heard from Si Huan's pitch-black mask. He tried his best to point at his neck, indicating that he was about to die. Although Qin Hao was extremely dissatisfied, he could not really strangle him to death. He slowly loosened his grip. "How is it, brother? It's a feast for the eyes. It's so satisfying," Si Huan said vulgarly. He bent down and grabbed the rock with both hands. His head carefully peeked out and stared at the beautiful bodies in the cold pond. His eyes shone with a golden light. If his face was not blocked, it was hard to imagine what kind of face the little overlord of the Western capital would have at this moment. Qin Hao's heart was beating very fast. He lowered his head and squatted behind the rock. He did not join in with Si Huan's shameless behavior. No wonder Si Huan was so careful when he found him. He was so secretive and told him not to tell anyone. He left the three-headed demon dragon at home and only brought Qin Hao out. It was because Qin Hao was very worried now. If they were discovered, how would he deal with it? His reputation was ruined in the hands of the little overlord of the Western capital. He became the crazy peeping demon of the infinite divine domain. Xiao Han knew what to do. If word got back to the divine wilderness and Vivian and Bauer found out, it was over. His reputation would be ruined. However, compared to this, he was more worried about being discovered by the deity of the eastern sky. How would he be able to return to the Western capital alive? The deity of the Eastern Victory was the strongest person in the divine domain besides the divine master. Even Daisakong was no match for him. At this moment, Qin Hao silently glanced at Si Huan. He saw that Si Huan was staring straight ahead. He was probably drooling. Qin Hao was considering whether to abandon the little overlord of the Western capital. It was still not too late to leave now. Unfortunately, Qin Hao did not have the chance. Almost as soon as he had this thought, a sigh could not help but be heard. It was especially clear in the cold pond under the spirit waterfall. "Wu-wu, I was born in the eastern deity heaven and bathed with the fairies. What more could I ask for?" Si Huan was so emotional that he shed tears. "Who are you?" "Ah! Thief!" Angry rebukes, screams, panic, and the sound of water splashing in the quiet cold pond instantly reached a boiling point. Countless fairies of the eastern deity heaven waved their hands to cover their bodies with clothes. Their palms flashed with a dazzling brilliance. Qin Hao was like a panicked rabbit. Without thinking, he instinctively grabbed Si Huan and ran. He shot into the sky from behind the rock. He used the fleetfoot stride to the extreme and rushed in the direction of the Western capital. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Dazzling streams of light shot out from the hands of the fairies of the eastern deity heaven. They were incomparably beautiful as they densely covered the sky. They had already sensed Qin Hao's aura and were incomparably furious. How could they tolerate a thief who came to peep at them bathing in the eastern divine region? Qin Hao grabbed Si Huan and weaved through the bombardment of countless emperor arts. His fleet-foot stride was unfathomable. Even though the fairies of the eastern deity heaven reacted extremely quickly, they were still too slow for Qin Hao. This gave him enough time to escape. Go! At this moment, at the edge of the cold pond, a powerful fairy saw that the thief was about to escape. She grabbed at the surface of the cold pond with her 5 fingers. Endless white frost was sucked into her palm, and she slammed it into the distance. Boom! When this palm landed, the void shook violently. The sound of ice forming could be heard. The terrifying ice Dao intent seemed to have frozen this part of the world and sealed all the exit. Qin Hao sensed that the person who attacked was a heaven wheel expert. When this terrifying ice intent swept over, ice crystals formed on his and Si Huan's bodies almost immediately and quickly spread. Qin Hao's speed suddenly came to a halt as he sank into the chill. It was as if he was about to be frozen. But it was only for an instant. With a crack, the ice crystals that spread over his body shattered. Qin Hao's body was covered in spots of fire. Like a bird that had escaped from its cage, he disappeared into the horizon. Damn it! Some of the fairies of the eastern deity heaven said with hatred. Their eyes were red. They had never suffered such humiliation. Not only were they seen naked, but the thief also ran away. This person's movement technique is extremely fast. His cultivation is not ordinary. Yeah, even senior sister couldn't stop him. The others were angry and helpless. Don't worry, he won't be able to escape. A tall and slender woman stood in front of the group of fairies. Earlier, she was the one who froze the void. At this moment, this fairy had a calm expression on her face. Although there was anger in her heart for not being able to make Qin Hao stay, she could sense 2 auras flying out from the Eastern Immortal Palace, pursuing after Qin Hao. She didn't know which direct disciple of the Celestial Lord was chasing after him. In short, there was no reason for the Eastern Deity Palace to return empty-handed. Awesome, this is too awesome. In the night sky, Si Huan was caught by Qin Hao. She was incomparably excited. What had he done just now? He had seen all the fairies of the Eastern Deity Heaven and had even managed to escape safely. In the entire divine realm, only he, the little overlord of the Western capital, had such ability. His achievements were enough to be proud of, and he could make all the disciples of the aristocratic families in the divine realm die of envy. If you speak again, I'll throw you down. Qin Hao's face was tense. His words scared Si Huan so much that he shut his mouth obediently. It was true that they had left the Eastern Deity Heaven, but this didn't mean that the matter was over. Qin Hao felt a powerful divine will coming from behind at an extremely shocking speed. So fast. Qin Hao's expression changed. He raised his hand and sent out a palm strike. Bang! An incomparably powerful palm force surged out. In the void, a ball of sparks exploded, accompanied by the sound of ice crystals shattering. Qin Hao's body trembled, suffering from the powerful impact. Holding Si Huan, he slid back a distance. Looking over, he saw a female figure in yellow standing in front of him. Her beautiful face was 30% angry, and the remaining 70% was endless coldness. She looked at Qin Hao as though she was looking at a dead man. In the divine realm, there aren't many who can fight against me with 2 divine inscriptions and below. No wonder you dare to come to the Eastern Deity Heaven and behave so atrociously. The yellow-robed female spoke. When her palm force collided, she discovered that Qin Hao's situation was the same as hers. They both had a single divine inscription. Qin Hao didn't reply. On his face, a pair of deep eyes paused for a moment on the yellow-robed female. His intuition told him that this person was extremely powerful. After all, with only a single divine inscription, there weren't many who could fight against Qin Hao. In fact, before coming to the Eastern Deity Heaven, he hadn't met anyone like this before. Bzzz. With a twist of his footsteps, Qin Hao rushed towards a direction, not bothering the yellow-robed female. The woman in yellow snorted coldly. She drew a few seals in front of her with her finger. Suddenly, there was a flash of light in front of her. Divine light shone brightly as sharp ice divine swords materialized. She pointed her finger at Qin Hao, and the sword light suddenly pierced towards him. This female's strength is so terrifying. Si Huan's heart trembled. Geniuses could be identified with a single glance. Although they hadn't broken through to the heavenly wheel realm, he had seen many of them before. The aura exuded by the yellow-robed female gave him an intense sense of danger. Even in the core of the divine realm, the Seamless Academy, there wasn't anyone as terrifying as her. Qin Hao's figure paused and immediately stopped. He had the same feeling as Si Huan. The yellow-clothed woman's strength was extremely extraordinary. It was impossible for such an expert to ignore the opponent's attack. A wisp of dark red flame ignited on the tip of Qin Hao's finger. He suddenly pointed over, and a flame divine sword burst forth. It shuttled through the void and collided with the opponent's ice sword. Countless ice crystals shattered, and it successively dissolved the opponent's will of Wei. It directly pierced the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-robed female had a look of astonishment on her face. After which, she waved her hand, causing Qin Hao's crimson lotus divine fire to dissipate. A bright moon appeared above her head, and when the moonlight cascaded down, everything was enveloped in frost. Celestial heavenly wheel. Qin Hao was shocked. The potential of an almighty was comparable to Lu Qiu and Long Mei's talent. No wonder her divine power was so strong. Boom! The yellow-robed female's arms shook, and her beautiful hair danced wildly. The bright moon hung in the sky, and the frost invaded. Endless sword light fell from the void, piercing towards Qin Hao's head. Don't fight with her. Run. Si Huan was so frightened that his expression changed. Only now did he realize that he was in big trouble. Although he thought that Qin Hao wasn't ordinary, Si Huan wasn't confident in fighting with a celestial heavenly wheel. Chapter 2039. Qian Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The spirit of loyalty. Qin Hao raised his head and looked around. This area was completely covered by the moonlight. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the powerful frost divine will sealed the space. Sword Qi was everywhere, faintly forming an attack. How could it be so easy to escape? He let go of Si Huan and raised his arms. A ball of flame appeared between his palms, and the red lotus divine fire on his body gathered into the ball of flame. It grew bigger and bigger, and the roar of a dragon could be heard between heaven and earth. Kill! The yellow-robed lady's face was cold. She pressed her palms down, and the frost sword Qi that filled the sky rapidly fell down. The scene was like a torrential downpour. Boom! At this moment, Qin Hao punched out, causing the gigantic sphere of light to explode. A flame dragon roared as it soared into the sky, transforming into a terrifying flame tornado. When the ice and frost sword Qi in the sky descended, they were all sucked into the flames and melted. Not bad. The yellow-robed lady couldn't help but praise. With such ability, why did he have to be a thief? She flicked her finger upwards, and instantly, the bright moon radiated a resplendent light. A powerful undercurrent of power surged up from below Qin Hao's position. As far as the eye could see, a vast expanse of frost appeared. It was like a peacock spreading its tail, fanning out in the shape of a fan and transforming into a 100-meter-long sword shadow. Si Huan saw this scene and was so frightened that he almost screamed. However, the yellow-robed lady's bright moon divine power didn't stop. It continued to rise until the frost almost covered her entire body. Following this, the hundreds of sword shadows became more and more solid, as if they had turned into a real frost sword mountain, trapping the two of them in the center. It's over, it's hopeless. When did such a fierce woman appear in the eastern sky celestial realm? Si Huan's expression was incomparably nervous. He hid behind Qin Hao and grabbed his clothes. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have made the eastern celestial cold lake his target today. Qin Hao also felt pressure from the yellow-robed lady. She was a celestial-level Tianlun. If she went all out, it was enough to expose his true strength. Qin Hao's expression became serious. He pointed his sword to the sky, trying to resonate with the way of heaven. Invisibly, a few strands of origin realm aura was released. Tianlun in his body. Boom! The surrounding huge frosty sword mountains began to move. The void rumbled as they crushed towards the center. Si Huan's face grew paler and paler. If they were really trapped here, with his ability, he might really lose his life. Whoosh! At this moment, a beam of sword light shot down from the sky and landed on the battlefield in time, nailing the position of Qin Hao and the others. This was an extremely vast sword light, as if it carried the might of the heavens. With a bang, the sword light fell, and the surrounding mountains of ice and frost exploded into millions of pieces, dispersing into the distance. Borrowing sword from the heavens. Qin Hao shouted in a deep voice. His sword fingers activated the sword will, and this beam of sword light that came from outer space charged towards the yellow-robed woman. Si Huan slapped the table in praise. Heavenly might, how is this possible? The yellow-robed lady's expression changed. She seemed to be in disbelief, but she did feel a strand of will of heaven from Qin Hao's sword will. Could this person be related to the Divine Master? Without much time to think, Qin Hao switched from defense to offense. In order to escape, he chose to take the initiative to attack. The attack that contained a strand of will of heaven was not to be underestimated. The yellow-robed lady raised her head and shouted. Her beautiful hair danced in the wind. Her body seemed to have turned into a real moon, filled with the divine will of frost. Gotcha! Layers of ice appeared between her and the sword from the heavens. They combined and formed an indestructible protective wall. When the sword pierced down, the whole world shook crazily. It was terrifying, as if the universe had been turned upside down. Inside the Eastern Divine Heaven sect, all the frozen spirit waterfalls exploded. For a moment the water surged like waves. Boom! The ice wall collapsed, and so did the sword chi. Qin Hao and the yellow-robed lady seemed to have suffered a heavy impact. Blood seeped out of the corners of their mouth. Their bodies slid back more than 100 feet. Si Huan was even worse. He let out a wild howl and flew up and down. It was as if he was blown away by a hurricane. He flew towards the sky uncontrollably. I have offended you today. I hope you can forgive. Qin Hao didn't have time to say the last word. Suddenly, a terrifying palm attack came from a certain direction. Qin Hao felt the divine will in this palm attack. His expression changed drastically. The heavenly wheel on his body instantly bloomed. For a moment, the blinding light of the wheel seemed to illuminate the night. Bang! As the incomparably heavy voice fell, the perfect wheel of light that appeared for a brief moment suddenly shattered. Qin Hao fell out like a kite with its string cut. A thick layer of frost covered his body. He resisted the feeling of his body being frozen and let out an earth-shattering dragon roar before his divine power was sealed in ice. True dragon roar. With the dragon roar, an incomparably huge divine dragon phantom appeared between heaven and earth. Turbulent winds spread out from the divine dragon's mouth and swept in all directions. The yellow-robed lady was stunned. She was bombarded by the sound wave. Her divine soul was in chaos. She covered her ears with both hands and screamed in pain. All the spirit waterfalls in the eastern divine heaven exploded, and the mountains collapsed. Rumble! After a violent tremor, the space returned to silence. But at this time, Qin Hao and Si Huan were long gone. The yellow-robed lady withstood the dragon roar. Her hair was messy, and the corners of her lips were stained with blood. Her clothes were also disheveled. She stood rooted to the ground and stared blankly for a long time. True dragon roar, the divine technique of the dragon clan. A goddess in a green dress appeared and stood beside the yellow-robed lady. She looked in the direction where Qin Hao had disappeared. Her eyes were filled with confusion. When the yellow-robed lady heard the other party's voice, she suddenly trembled. Only then did she regain her senses. Her disheveled face was filled with anger. She was about to give chase. No need to give chase, the goddess in a green dress said. The little overlord of the Sikong clan in the west capital, Si Huan. The yellow-robed lady gritted her teeth. When the true dragon roar disrupted her divine soul, she saw the bright red hair clearly. Since we know that he is the little overlord of the Sikong clan, there is no point in giving chase, the goddess in a green dress said. But senior sister. The yellow-robed lady looked at the other party. The hatred in her heart could not be quelled. The goddess in a green dress smiled and said, "If we don't tell anyone, no one else in the divine realm will know." What happened today was indeed difficult for the Eastern Divine Heaven to talk about. As for Daisakong, if the Eastern Divine Heaven did not say anything, the other party would not dare to spread the news either. Once it was spread, both sides' reputations would be damaged. The yellow-robed lady gritted her teeth. The scene of her battle with Qin Hao appeared in her mind. If it were not for the fact that she was blocked, Si Huan would definitely not have been able to escape. To be able to fight evenly with junior sister, this person is definitely not a nobody. There will be plenty of opportunities to settle the score. Let's go back. The goddess in a green dress smiled and took the yellow-robed lady's hand. The heavenly wheel realm cultivator beside Si Huan was not simple. He had the supreme divine technique of the dragon clan and could borrow the power of the heavenly path. It was difficult to guarantee that he was not someone beside the divine master. If that was the case, the Eastern Divine Heaven would not be able to obtain justice even if they continued to fight. After all, the Divine Master had the final say in the Divine Realm. The yellow-robed lady glanced in the direction of the western capital, as if she wanted to remember something. Then, the two of them returned to the Eastern Divine Palace. Qin Hao's identity was a mystery in their hearts. They couldn't sense any signs of life from him. "Stop talking nonsense. He said you can save him. If you don't help, he'll die," Si Huan shouted angrily. Swoosh! A beam of sword light rested on Si Huan's neck. Wux's emperor intent formed a sword. The sharp golden blade in his hand could end Si Huan's life with a slight movement. "Don't be rash. Let's save him," Xin said. He and Divine Lord Taichu channeled their divine power. 4 palms fell on Qin Hao's body. Suddenly, divine light shone brightly. Dazzling light bathed Qin Hao's body, trying to melt the ice. However, Xin and Divine Lord Taichu worked together but couldn't break the ice on Qin Hao's body at all. There was no sign of it breaking. "Chu Patriarch, Qi people, little he, you come too," Xin said. The 3 figures approached. Beams of divine light of Tianluan bloomed one after another, surrounding everyone. Waves of divine power fell on Qin Hao. However, what was shocking was that the flames of the Way of the Qi and Chu Patriarch, as well as Xin and the others, couldn't do anything to the ice on Qin Hao's body. There was no reaction at all. How can this be? Chu Patriarch was extremely shocked. He looked up at Qi Zhu. Qi Zhu asked Si Huan, "What kind of ice technique is he under? Who hurt him?" Chapter 2040. Si Huan had called Qin Hao out, but no one knew where he had gone or what he had done. Now that he had returned, he was unconscious and his body was frozen. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. Everyone knew how capable Qin Hao was. He had forged a perfect heavenly wheel, taken over the heavenly path of Kunlun, and become the god of Kunlun. He carried the power of all living beings on the Kunlun continent. To put it bluntly, there were few opponents below the Divine Master level who could hurt him. After the battle at the Kunlun Sea, Qi Zhu and Ancestor Chu both thought that Qin Hao had endless potential. It was because of this that they decided to follow and assist him. Xin knew Qin Hao better than the two great ancestors. He not only carried the power of all living beings on the Kunlun continent, but he was also the ruler of the heavenly path of the original realm. With the power of two planes in his body and his extraordinary talent, it was hard to imagine that he had been injured so badly. I hope young Master C can tell us the truth. Although we are prisoners, we still have the determination to attack the Sikong residents. Even if we fail, the Heaven's Eye Divine World will definitely send people to investigate. Xin's eyes were cold. He had high hopes for Qin Hao. Although Si Huan believed that he could save Qin Hao, the premise was that Xin could not remove the divine ice in his body. How could he save Qin Hao? Si Huan stammered. Thinking of the scene at the cold lake, he found it difficult to speak. Let me do it. A figure stepped into the courtyard. Suddenly, a powerful aura rushed over. Xin looked up and said, Senior Sikong. Fortunately, it was not immortal Venerable Dongsheng. Otherwise, it would have been difficult. Daisakong looked down at Qin Hao's condition and sighed. He waved at Xin and the others. Everyone understood tacitly and immediately gave up their seat. At this moment, Xin and the others were shaken. They had been in the infinite divine realm for so long, so they had heard a little about the forces in the divine realm. The Eastern Victory Immortal Venerable that Daisakong spoke of was a peak powerhouse in the divine realm. He had established the Eastern Immortal Heaven and had countless disciples. His might shook the entire Eastern Divine region, and he was known as the #1 heavenly wheel expert under the Divine Master realm. His status was comparable to exalted Zi Hua of the heavenly Ho divine realm. At this moment, everyone finally understood that Si Huan had brought Qin Hao to the eastern celestial heavens, and the frost on his body was caused by the experts of the eastern celestial heavens. They couldn't help but feel shocked. Daisakong looked at Qin Hao and saw the thick ice covering his body. His expression turned serious. Then, he slowly extended a finger and pointed at Qin Hao's forehead. Dazzling divine light appeared on Daisakong's body. Strands of dazzling light flickered along his fingertip and merged into the terrifying ice. What a powerful sword intent! Wuk thought. Daisakong's sword intent was similar to his myriad manifestations' sword intent. They both contained extremely powerful sharpness, but the two were different. My master, Sikong, cultivates the sword intent of Tianyang. At the side, Zhang Yi explained softly. The cultivators of the infinite divine realm only cultivated the way of the sword, and the way of the sword was ever-changing. The three great sword realms had multiplied countless times. Daisakong's Tianyang sword intent had softened the light attribute, and its killing power was stronger than other sword cultivators. Besides, as a former servant of the Divine Master, the Sikong family also dabbled in the way of the Sword of Space, but it wasn't very strong. Strands of Tianyang's sword intent were continuously injected into the ice. Daisakong's body flickered with even more dazzling light, condensing into a flowing wheel of light. 4 divine patterns appeared at the edge of the wheel of light, and it was filled with boundless divine power of the way of the sword. Under the erosion of this power, the ice covering Qin Hao's body gradually changed. It kept cracking and melting, turning into strands of white, frozen air that floated in spirals. When Xin and the others felt the strength of the white, frozen air, their expressions changed. At the same time, they retreated some distance and watched as the white, frozen air was evaporated by Daisakong's sword intent. All right, I've melted the power that sealed him in ice. I'll leave the rest to you. After all, you alchemists are better at it. If there's anything else you need, just tell Zhang Yi. The Sikong family will cooperate fully. Daisakong said, and the wheel of light retracted into his body. He glared at Si Huan and said angrily, "Bastard, come with me." With that, he walked out of the courtyard. At first, he thought that Si Huan would bring Qin Hao into the forbidden area of the Eastern Divine Heaven. Who would have thought that he would peep at the disciple of the immortal Venerable Dong Sheng bathing? It was a disgrace to the family and an unforgivable crime. "Zhang Yi, help me take good care of Chu San." Si Huan lowered his head and said, then followed Daisakong and left. "Everyone, I'll be waiting outside the courtyard. If you need anything, just let me know," Zhang Xian said. Xin nodded slightly. At this moment, the people of the Sikong family had all left. Those who were guarding Qin Hao were the people of Kunlun's Haiyuan. Chizu glanced outside the courtyard and whispered, "Xin, Daisakong seems to have recognized us." "It's not surprising. It's more important to check on Chu San's condition first." Xin sat down and gently held Qin Hao's wrist with one hand. He closed his eyes slightly and used his divine will to check. As time passed, his face became more and more unpleasant. Although the divine power that froze Qin Hao's body had been dissolved by Daisakong's sword will, there was still a terrible frost power left in his body. This power had penetrated his limbs and organs. At present, Qin Hao's body seemed to have turned into a 10,000-year-old ice house. His vitality had stopped flowing, and his divine soul, vitality, and divine power had fallen into a deep sleep. His situation was extremely bad. However, Qin Hao's Tianluan was still operating and didn't seem to be affected much. Ziyin realized that Qin Hao's Tianluan contained a strange power that was like a crystalline water flowing around it. Because of its existence, the frost divine power that was corroding Qin Hao's body was constantly being sucked in, slowly fusing into the water flow and dissolving into nothing. This situation was very rare. It seemed to be an instinctive self-healing. Strange. Xin frowned. He had lived for 10,000 years and as an alchemist, he had seen many strange illnesses. However, he had never seen a situation like Qin Hao's. "Sect leader, are you confident?" Xiao Han's eyes were red as his hands trembled. His emotions were very unstable. "Don't be nervous. Chu San's situation isn't as bad as we imagined. What I find strange is that he seems to have a self-healing ability. Do you guys know about this?" Xin glanced at Xiao Han, Wuk, and the others. "Self-healing ability?" Wuk pondered for a moment. "Sect leader, can you explain it more clearly?" Chu San's wheel contained a type of water power. Although it hasn't been refined into divine force, its power was enough to melt the ice in his body. Xin spoke. This wasn't simple. After all, the frost divine power of experts from the eastern immortal heavens wasn't something that he, Taichu, and the others could resolve. Could it be the tranquil nether water? Wuk looked at Xiao Han as he recalled. It should be. Xiao Han nodded as his tensed heartstrings loosened slightly. The 10 elements were born together with the heavenly Tao of the divine desolate realm. They could be seen as the power of the desolate realm. Although their attributes were different, each of them had shocking potential and could bring about miracles. I don't know much about the tranquil nether water. Based on Chu San's current situation, we were the ones who scared ourselves earlier. He can completely undo the seal on his body and remove the frost divine power of the eastern immortal heavens. However, since Senior Sikong has melted the ice in his body, we can't be idle. At the very least, we can concoct some pills to help Chu San regain his consciousness. Xin's frown loosened as he heaved a sigh of relief. Xiaohe, start the cauldron. Yes, master. Qin Xiaohe waved her hand and a divine cauldron appeared in the center of the courtyard. Rows of medicinal herbs were placed on the shelves, filled with heavenly spiritual treasures. I'll make a list later. Chu Yu, go and look for Lord Zhang San and see if he can gather all the medicinal herbs. Zine flicked his finger and a wisp of flame shot towards the bottom of the cauldron. Then, the cauldron floated up and rotated slowly as he started to concoct pills. The frost power in Qin Hao's body was very strong. Ordinary medicinal herbs would probably not be of much use to concoct pills. He needed the medicine to be more potent. Unfortunately, he didn't bring enough divine herbs. He couldn't possibly move the few celestial mountains in the Kunlun Sea out of the door. Yes, clan leader, Chu Yu nodded. Then, Zine drew in the air with his finger, which condensed into wisps of light that entered Chu Yu's mind. Chu Yu immediately ran out to look for Zhang San. All right, let's disperse. I can concoct the pills alone. You're all suppressed by the heavenly path, and your situation isn't too good either. Just hold on for a few days and wait for Chu San to wake up. Zine instructed. Everyone nodded and returned to their rooms to regulate their breathing and cultivate. I want to stay with him. Xiao Han squatted down and held Qin Hao's cold hand. All right. Zine didn't refuse. He turned and walked towards the cauldron. He threw divine herbs into it and focused on concocting pills. He needed to concoct 2 types of pills. One was the fire-gathering pill, and the other was a pill that could stimulate the Tao of water. He tried to use these 2 methods to speed up the process of dissolving the frost power in Qin Hao's body. The process went very smoothly. After Chu Yu obtained the required medicinal herbs from Zhang San, the 2 types of divine pills were concocted the next day. For this, Zine's body was exhausted. Qin Hao swallowed the medicinal pill and only woke up 5 days later. He slowly recovered and took a turn for the better. This trip shocked the Eastern deity Heaven slightly. It allowed him to see the true experts of the seamless divine domain. He was also dissatisfied with his own cultivation. He was still not strong enough. Heavenly Library. It was located in various parts of the divine realm. Almost every city had a heavenly library. The West capital was naturally no exception. At this time, in the heavenly library of the West capital city, a figure was sitting in the hall. His silver hair fluttered gently, and traces of divine wool flowed around his body. In front of Qin Hao, there was a tiny altar that was no more than 5 feet tall. Above the altar, there was an ancient book floating in the air. At this moment, the ancient book was emitting a powerful divine light. The pages flipped on their own, and countless divine runic seals floated out, landing on Qin Hao's body. Every divine runic seal that landed on Qin Hao's body would vanish very quickly, as if they had merged with his divine will. For several days, Qin Hao comprehended in the heavenly library. He used this to comprehend the Tao of the seamless divine Lord.